Hello, and welcome to the Actual Tech Media MegaCast. My name is Jess, and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information to cover with you. Let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. Now, if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Also, keep in mind that if you have any tech issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you. So throughout today's MegaCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all of your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. And if we do not get to your question during the webinar, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us today will be following up with you after we wrap. All right, next up on our tour, there are going to be lots of cool aha moments in the MegaCast today, and if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there in your audience console, and the hashtag for today's MegaCast will automatically get added to your post. And our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the Handouts tab for some resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection of solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. And if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes we will be giving away throughout the MegaCast today. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. You do need to be in attendance here live at the webinar in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all winners after we wrap the MegaCast today. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, hey, if you're not sure what those are, no problem. You can find the full T's and C's in that Handouts tab. Again, just click into the Handouts section, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find the full T's and C's waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember here today is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. In today's MegaCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all the questions asked after the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about winning, and we will get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the MegaCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going. So let's connect on social. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content right away after we wrap, you want to jump right in, make sure that you subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and to grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you're going to find a link to do that right there in that Handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected after we wrap today. Now, both you and your coworker, your friend, could win a prize, and we actually hold those drawings every month. So be sure you refer somebody awesome before you head out today. It could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your Handouts tab and fill out the application. Then the Actual Tech crew will match you with some vendors that we think you should be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you can choose to join in, like surveys or test running new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you will learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker in your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, how to prevent and recover. The site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. So go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books are going to work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and they are completely free, super easy. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in the handouts tab as well. Okay, well, we've covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get rolling.
Hello, and welcome, folks. It is shaping up to be an epic MegaCast today as we explore the topic Wrangling Passwords, Authentication, and Identity Keys to Success. Effective management of passwords, authentication, and identity is the new frontline defense in the battle against cybercriminals. Today, we'll delve into the strategies and best practices that IT professionals and managers need to adopt to enhance security and streamline identity management. You'll gain insights into the latest advancements in authentication technologies, explore methods to mitigate risks associated with password breaches, and come to understand the importance of a robust identity management framework. So do not fret if this is something you feel has a lot of work ahead of you. Today we will be diving deep down the rabbit hole of all things passwords and authentication, and you will leave equipped with the tools to take this challenge head on. I'm thrilled to not have just one, not just two, but 6 teams presenting today. We have top experts in the field from Duo Security, a Cisco company, KnowBe4, Okta, Rubrik, SecureAuth, and Haiku. All of that in addition to our talented keynote speaker, Ward Spangenberg, who is going to get us started today. I know you are all ready and pumped to begin, and we have a boatload of information to cover today, so we'll get things rolling here with just a few last little bits of housekeeping info and then get our speakers out here with us. So, very quickly, once again, my name is Mackenzie Puddesy, and I am a moderator here at Actual Tech Media, and my friends and fellow moderators, Jess Steinbach, Scott Becker, and Keith Ward, are here with us on live chat today, and I will also have Jess in the wings helping to interview some of our teams. And in more exciting news, prizes, yes. You could win one of 3 Kindle Scribes, and we will also be giving away a $300 Amazon gift card every 30 minutes during today's event. A reminder that you must be present and live with us at the MegaCast to win. And as mentioned in the housekeeping chat this morning, you can find the full T's and C's linked in the handouts tab if you have any questions about that. Plus, each session has a $50 gift card for the best question asked. So make sure you are sending in your questions and active in the chat today. So without pushing you too hard, why don't you send that energy and excitement around to your fellow attendees with a big hi, hello, howdy, hola, aloha, bonjour, or whatever greeting of your choice now in the questions tab. We love to see it. And again, send in those awesome and thoughtful questions during each session. You may need to expand that that questions and handout window to see what's going on in there. And with that, I think we are ready to rock. I'm so excited to introduce our newest keynote speaker, Ward Spangenberg, who will be enlightening us on this topic and setting the stage for today. Ward is the founder and principal consultant at Altgreen Research, LLC, and an esteemed speaker and presenter. Ward, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to hear what you have prepared for us. So why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Good morning, afternoon, and evening. It's a privilege to be here today with you to discuss an increasingly vital topic, mastering the complexities of passwords, authentication, and identity management. As technology has evolved, so do the challenges faced in securing our digital identities. Today, I plan to share a combination of new concepts with tried and true methods to help you stay ahead of the curve. We're going to explore 5 areas: strong password policies, multi-factor authentication, adaptive access control, behavioral biometrics, and continuous authentication. Let's dive in. Strong password policies. Let's start with the foundation yet indispensable element of digital security program, strong password policies. Utilizing things like complexity and length ensure that passwords are complex and sufficiently long to withstand brute force attacks. encouraging our users to create passwords that are at least 12 characters long, incorporate a mixture of upper and lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters, make them complex. Even the word password, utilizing special characters and numbers, can be made complex. Using regular updates. Forcing users to regularly update passwords is crucial. Implementing policies requiring them to change their passwords every 60 to 90 days. This minimizes the risk of old compromised passwords being used to gain unauthorized access. Now, let's use a password manager. Promote the use of password managers. These tools can generate and store complex passwords, reducing that risk associated with human memory limitations and a tendency to use weak or reuse passwords. Now, I understand there's a shift away from passwords towards passwordless authentication. I support these techniques. Using technologies like biometric authentication, which we'll discuss in a minute, hardware tokens, and magic links to send an email or SMS help enhance security, but also improve user experiences by eliminating that hassle of remembering a complex password. Look for a solution that integrates multiple features and can help secure those passwords. Multi-factor authentication. We know that passwords alone are not enough to protect our sensitive information. This is where MFA comes into play. MFA requires our users to provide 2 or more verification factors to gain access. These factors typically include something you know, a password, something you have, maybe it's a mobile device or a security token, and something you are, biometrics, fingerprints, facial recognition. This layered approach significantly enhances security, as even if one factor is compromised, the additional layers provide safeguards. We start to look at things like adaptive authentication. Implement adaptive authentication methods that consider user behavior and context. For example, if a login attempt is made from an unfamiliar device or location, the system can provide a prompt for that additional MFA, adding an extra layer of security. Utilizing these things opens the door for adaptive access control, a dynamic approach to securing your access. It adjusts security measures based on the context of the access request. Factors such as location, device, time of day, and user behaviors are analyzed to determine the level of risk. Accessing sensitive information from a trusted device within the office might require single authentication, while access from an unknown device outside normal work hours might trigger that MFA response. We can apply risk-based authentication. Implementing risk-based authentication evaluates the risk level of each login attempt in real time. High-risk scenarios prompt additional security measures, ensuring that legitimate users can access resources without unnecessary friction, while potential threats are mitigated effectively. Behavioral biometrics. Continuous monitoring. So behavioral biometrics allow us to analyze the patterns in user behavior, such as typing, mouse movements, and even their screen interactions. These patterns are unique to each individual and provide a continuous authentication mechanism that is difficult to replicate. We can look at anomalies. Behavioral biometrics can detect anomalies in user behavior, signaling potential security breaches. For example, if an employee who usually logs in from a desktop suddenly logs in from a mobile device with different typing patterns, the system can flag this as suspicious and require additional verification. Finally, let's explore continuous authentication, a concept that enhances security throughout the user session. Utilizing real-time security, we provide continuous authentication models, constantly verifying the user's identity throughout their session. This is achieved through various means such as behavioral biometrics, device analytics, and environmental factors. Continuous authentication ensures that the user remains authenticated without repeatedly asking for those credentials, providing a seamless security picture. Session monitoring and threat detection. By continuously monitoring the session, any deviation from the established user behavior can trigger an alert or terminate the session. This proactive approach helps in identifying and responding to security threats in real time, reducing the window of opportunity for a malicious actor. In conclusion, mastering passwords, authentication, and identity management requires a blend of innovative approaches and established best practices. Implementing strong password policies, adopting multi-factor authentication, embracing technologies like adaptive access control, behavioral biometrics, and continuous authentication can create a robust defense against that ever-evolving threat in the digital landscape. These methods not only enhance your security, but also simplify your user experience, paving the way for a safer and more secure environment. Remember, security is staying one step in front of an attacker. It's a marathon, never a sprint. Thank you for your time. I look forward to your questions. And now back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ward. It's honestly crazy to think how my keystrokes or mouse movements could be almost like a fingerprint and say, okay, this is how I use the computer, which sets me apart from someone else. Amazing what's under the hood. So if you haven't noticed already, I have got a poll up for you here. The poll is simply asking, what is your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company? Is this something you're looking to do right away, next kind of 0 to 6 months? Are you looking 6 to 12, maybe a year out, 12 to 24? Or maybe you're just not sure, you're getting a lay of the land, seeing what's out there, seeing what the options are, and that is okay too. That is a perfect reason to be here and a perfect time frame to have as well. Now, we've got a lot of great information lined up on your MegaCast here today, so I'm going to get things started by introducing our first speaker and our first team. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our friends from Duo. We're back in the house and ready to kick things off. Without further ado, please give a warm welcome from the Duo security team to Ted Keatsman, Product Marketing Manager. And again, a little reminder as we get things going that there is a Best Question gift card of $50 for each session, so it may literally pay to be active and engaged. That said, please do send in thoughtful, mindful questions, as there will be plenty of opportunities today. I'll be joining Ted for some Q&A once he wraps up his presentation, but until then, Ted, I'm going to kick things over to you. Take it away.
Hello. Can you hear me okay? Is the audio working?
Yes, you are good to go.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So yeah, thanks for hosting, and I'm so happy to be here. So my name's Ted. I'm from Duo, and the topic of my presentation today is called Expanding Beyond Authentication, which if you know anything about Duo, you might go, but aren't you guys mainly authentication? I think that's true. If Duo has been traditionally associated with MFA, that's our flagship. We provide really nice multi-factor authentication that can fit into all those hard to reach places in your organization. But given some trends we're seeing in the industry, we sort of think it's time to move beyond just that as a control. And so let's move on here. I wanted to start the presentation off with just a state of identity security. This is top of mind for a lot of folks in the industry today. Identity as a perimeter seems to be under attack. That the big headline breaches that are coming out over the last 6 to 18 months all seem to involve some sort of identity component and a lateral movement or those sorts of things, starting with the compromise of credentials and then getting access from there. And so let's start with the big stat. I feel like every presentation starts with a big stat. And actually, I'm sort of poking fun at this because I didn't even cite the source here under here, because I feel like if you're in this room listening to this MegaCast, you know what the source of this stat is, because it gets shown in presentations like this quite a lot, which, 74% of breaches involve the human element. So if anyone wants to guess, they can type it in, but the answer is it's from the Verizon Data Breach and Incident Investigations Report. And to me, I see this stat comes out year after year. It's always like 70%. And I go, why is that the case? Why does this number stay consistent? We've had advances in authentication technology over the last 5 to 10 years, 20 years. We're doing better things as defenders. Why do these breaches keep happening? And so I wanted to look under this number and try to see some trends as to why it might be the case that no matter what we do, it feels like this stays consistent. And so what I did was I was looking under the data. And so that Verizon Data Breach and Investigation Report has a specific section that stays the same year over year that are the top action varieties that happen in breaches. So the actions that go into a breach. And they track phishing and use of stolen credentials. It's sort of funny to me that they track them separately. I think they kind of overlap. Like you phish to obtain credentials in a lot of cases, and sort of make them disparate use cases. So I combine them into sort of one metric of between the two of these together, phishing and use of stolen credentials. That's basically been involved in 60-ish% of breaches for the last 5 years in a row. Every time the report comes out, breaches that involve use of stolen credentials and phishing make up 60% of breaches. They have those actions as a part of them. But if we look even deeper, so yeah, that's basically a constant. We see that over time. That hasn't changed over the last 5 years. But if we also look at, if we add on pretexting, which I would argue is a slightly more nuanced form of the prior two, where it's like the idea that you're providing a pretext for the social engineering or for the phishing email. You're saying, I am your boss, or I am from the IT department and I need you to reset your password. That's a pretext for a particular attack. So this is a more sophisticated form of attack. They started tracking this as well, or they have been tracking this as an action. And that over the last 5 years is increasing really, really dramatically. So this is maybe even more than linear, but at this point, it's at least linear over time that the amount of pretexting that's happening in breaches is happening. Now, to be clear, I'm not trying to fool anyone. It started as a very low percentage 5 years ago. It's like just 2% of breaches. So this isn't super significant yet, but over the last 5 years, it's increased to 12% of breaches, which is pretty significant. It's not the highest in the world, but this is a trend we don't like to see, is that more sophisticated forms of social engineering are increasing over time, which I guess that sort of makes sense. So that's not ideal. This is not from the Verizon Data Breach Report. It's actually from a Microsoft Digital Defense Report, but I think it shows a similar trend that is not our favorite, which is that adversary in the middle. For those of you who don't know, that's just it's even a more advanced form of social engineering where you're actually doing some work to set up that page in between, or a login page that looks exactly the same as the traditional login page, and you snag credentials either as they're being typed in or after an approved authentication goes through. And so this report showed that from basically, this is just a year. So this isn't the 5-year time span. It's from June 2022 to June 23. So 1 year, the number of domains associated with adversary in the middle attacks quadrupled. So we're basically seeing a really incredible increase in this sophisticated attack as well, which all leads me to say, basically, one of the reasons that remains constant in light of the fact that we're doing a lot more to defend against these types of attacks is traditional mechanisms like phishing are still working. But two, the use of more sophisticated credential compromise techniques is accelerating dramatically. So we have these two things happening at the same time. One, there's a constant where traditional mechanisms are working still. And two, we have this up and to the right trend with things that are harder to defend, more sophisticated. So attackers are just improving is the long and short of it. So isn't there any good news in all of this? So I think yes. This is from an internal report that the Duo Threat Research team did on the strength of WebAuthn. So for those in the audience who I feel like most people know these terms, but I like to define them just in case. WebAuthn is a component of the FIDO2 protocol. It's short for Web Authentication, and it's a way to passwordlessly or create a credential that is bound to a device and is passwordless, so it's not you relying on a password anymore. So the analysis that the Duo Threat Research team said, the large quote here, is that in an authentication, WebAuthn acts as full mitigation for adversary in the middle attacks. And this is largely because WebAuthn origin binding properties, basically that it says this credential only works at the actual Salesforce domain, let's say, versus the fake domain that the attacker set up to make you log in. So because it does that, because the WebAuthn credential only works at the right domain, it's something that's a really nice mitigation against adversary in the middle. So that's good. That should be good news. And for those of you who have been thinking about passwordless auth or trying to implement passwordless auth, this type of news on the auth front is really good. And we're excited about that. However, at least from our perspective at Duo, we still see that WebAuthn is vastly underdeployed across the workforce industry. So I should be clear, I went to Identiverse a couple of weeks ago, and I think in the consumer side, so me as a consumer end user logging into my Bank of America account, I think WebAuthn is seeing much more traction. But as a workforce user, so me as a worker logging into a Duo application or an application for work, that's still very underdeployed. At Duo, we do a trusted access report that evaluates all sorts of authentications. We see 1 billion authentications a month, and less than 5% of those auths are WebAuthn or passkey based. So, I mean, if I were to show you that graph, it's been accelerating, which is good over time, but it's still such a small percent compared to, we see a ton of push-based auths or SMS-based MFA or phone callback MFA. And so this strongest or best form of authentication is still relatively underdeployed in the industry. And so just to evaluate that, there was a good article that came out, and its sources, why aren't we using passkeys, if you're interested. And it was an interview with, I think, something like a dozen CISOs. And and I think it came out a couple of years ago, so maybe it's like 18 months ago. So it's a little out of date. I think people are slowly evolving to be more and more into the idea of passwordless. But these are the 3 reasons that we see that low adoption of passkeys. Basically, some people feel like they have no need, or that we just told them to put seatbelts in their car, aka MFA, and now we're telling them that they need airbags too, aka update everything to passwordless. So there's just not enough urgency there. And besides creating the urgency, there are cost concerns. Do I rip and replace all of the traditional solutions I have in place? What's the cost going to be of making everyone switch an authenticator or whatever? So there's worries there. And finally, then this is very pertinent in the workforce use cases as opposed to consumer side. There's just a lot of use cases that passkeys and WebAuthn, the name is WebAuthn, so web, don't work for as well when it comes to workforce. So things that rely on legacy authentication protocols like Radius, they're a little bit harder to get passkeys in front of. Not impossible, but it just, because of that technical difficulty, there's a little bit of a difficult, it's more challenging that way. So that all means that a lot of folks in there, when they think about the authentication environment in their worker environment or for their organization, it looks something like this. So this graph might be a little bit hard to parse on first glance, but this basically just means along the bottom axis, there are different types of authentication scenarios. So there's a remote access scenario, there's maybe domain joined or managed devices, there's SaaS apps, and then there's even more technically challenging use cases or niche use cases, you could say, like Linux and offline or contractors accessing your environment. And oftentimes what we've seen is people have an environment that looks something like this, which means maybe they deployed passkeys or some sort of passwordless authentication, phishing resistant MFA on one use case, the sort of low hanging fruit use case. And then they have traditional MFA, let's say push-based MFA, phone callback, even SMS, which is better than nothing. I feel like SMS gets a lot of hate, and sometimes it should because it's the weakest form of MFA, but some MFA is always better than none. So there's traditional MFA in a variety of other spots. And then there are a few that are technically hard to protect it's sort of lower volume of authentication, so they don't get the same treatment and they don't have MFA. And so that's where attackers will target. I think in news headlines, you'll see, we all in the industry know, you'll read the news article about a breach and it'll say, and the attacker logged in at a place that wasn't protected with MFA. And all of us slap our heads and go, we all know at this point that you're supposed to have MFA everywhere. What was going on? Well, I would argue that they probably look something like this, where there was great, strong MFA on one of the use cases, but the attacker found and sniffed out that area where there wasn't any MFA. So just to TLDR what I just talked about, I think credentials are still the keys to the kingdom, but we've seen that strong authentication has low adoption, so that strongest forms of authentication, at least today. And also attackers are doubling down on bypassing traditional forms of MFA with techniques like pretexting or phishing, and also even something as sophisticated as an adversary in the middle, where they're setting up that fake website. So all of that to say, we think authentication alone as the control point is failing. And that sort of we have to put our hat in our hand a little bit on that and go, I mean, we're an authentication provider, so it's definitely something that we've been thinking about, is like, okay, if this is the truth of the matter, what can we do to help? And we think expanding beyond authentication is going to be key in the next 18 to 24 months for folks. And what do I mean by that? If authentication and access policy is number 2 in this sort of framework, or in the middle, I think before that, there's an identity, visibility, and posture element that we can start thinking about. And after that, we can start thinking about identity, threat detection, and response. And so let's dig in a little bit more to these terms. But what is that identity visibility piece? That's gain visibility into IAM infrastructure, especially typical access patterns and policies. What I mean there is, I think many people understand that identity isn't simple anymore. Maybe 10 years ago, like everyone had Active Directory and that was it, an on-premise Active Directory. But now there are a lot of different sources of identity data, and they all interact in different ways. And I think it's pretty difficult. Right now, they're siloed. You have your cloud-based ones, you have your on-premise pieces, you then have different like sort of adjacent or use case-based sources of identity data, like an HR system like Workday. And these, they have siloed data and they don't speak to each other. And this makes it very hard to understand all the things that are going on. So what we think is really important is starting to think about building an identity graph or connecting all of that data somehow. We think that it's important to sort of create these connections, see what's happening. If my name's Ted and I have a bunch of accounts, see what all of my accounts are doing in a centralized place instead of having to log into each of those identity systems. And so thinking about and creating an identity graph so that you know who does what typically. Are my credentials acting like they typically act? And then doing things like why I call this authentication. You can do things like, does Ted need this much access? Ted's been an admin for this for 6 months. He never logs into it. You can do a lot of proactive work when you build out a graph like this. And I think that can be really helpful to just hardening your defenses before anything even happens. So when you have this information, really nice to be able to build out that way. When I think about I think about a few different things here, but basically, I think this goes back to the speaker who was before me, who was listening in on a little bit, but you want to do a lot of these things, like implement at least traditional MFA wherever possible. I really believe in trusted device policy. And I think that gets sometimes not a bad rep, but people undersell how important it can be to just, if you know that the device is associated with a particular person and that's their device, it's really helpful because an attacker doesn't have that device usually. It's a much higher bar to steal someone's device or own their device than to just own their credentials and log in from your own device. And so I think that's really powerful. Access policy based on location or IP, and then implement risk-based or continuous policy too. So that's all in the second bucket. And I think all of those things add together to make for a really nice, like if we can't put phishing resistant MFA everywhere, which I think is hard to do today, I think it can be nice to be like, okay, we'll at least get MFA everywhere, maybe do trusted device policy, add an identity context or tighter policy, and you can stack those things and get this sort of defense in depth on many more of the use cases that might be technically not ready to have a passkey or WebAuthn in front of them. So I think that's just to strengthen auth, you can put that defense in depth in place. And finally, when we think about ITDR, which is a relatively new term, this is just this idea that once you have that identity graph, what pops out of that is you can start to look at things like, was a new IDP created? Did an admin register a new device? You can have events like that and start to say, okay, I'm detecting identity-based sort of, or actions that are associated with identity-based threats. So this is post, you have your defenses in place, you have that visibility, and you're looking to say, okay, but if something does happen and an admin starts to act haywire, I want to know when that happens as fast as possible, and then take a powerful remediation action, whether that's, revoke their session or reset their credentials or make them have to log in again. All of those things you want to be able to do really quickly in an automated fashion. So we think that that's really important. Basically, adding this element onto that identity-based threat piece, I think is really important, where after you have those defenses in place, after you have that visibility, you have an ability to detect when things are going awry or are risky and respond to them really easily via a workflow or via an automated action. So that's, I think, where I would say that's where we need to get to. So I know I'm getting shorter on time, but I just want to go back and say, before I finish and go to questions, just want to show this one slide one more time, this is where I think we really need to get to as we expand beyond the auth and access policy piece in both a pre and post direction. So we still want to strengthen authentication as a piece of the puzzle and strengthen the access policies associated with it. But in front of that, you want to add on identity, visibility, and posture to it, make sure you're taking proactive steps. And after that, having a really nice identity threat detection and response program, or starting to build and think about that, I think is really important. And with that, I'll conclude and head over to Q&A.
All right. Excellent presentation. Thank you. You've got a ton of questions, so we're going to try to get through as many as possible here. And I'm going to just throw up a poll. So anyone out there who is curious to get a little bit of additional information about Duo's solution, feel free to fill that in. Do you guys want data sheets, pricing details, a personal demo? What are you looking for? This is your wish list, your easy button. Just plunk that in and the Duo team will pass it over after today's MegaCast. And with that, let's dive into it, Ted. Are you ready?
I am.
Okay, this first question is, this all seems to focus on security, which is good, but we're already asking our users to authenticate a lot. We hear an earful about it. Is there any way to truly improve user experience too?
That is a great question. So I think we in security, we're kind of constantly forced to balance how much friction we put in front of users. So asking them to do another thing, adding them to sign up for or like enroll their device in something, asking them to auth a lot. But I think what's nice about adding on that identity graph or the analytics or the continuous evaluation. So I think the prior speaker talked about this too. But when you start to evaluate user data, there's actually a benefit that pops out that you can, when they're doing all the same things. So I work from this home office every day. I work from the same laptop. I should have expedited access, and you can enable that. This is like, it's Ted Keatsman's credentials. They're doing everything that they're supposed to do. And that's something we focus on at Duo quite a lot, is this ability to say, this user is doing everything that they've always done. They're from the same laptop. It's got the same posture, same health. Everything's up to date. They're working at the same time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That just validates that we can give them a longer session. We can lower the number of times they have to authenticate. So I think it's a really good important piece is when you start to put the analytics in place, when you start to be able to evaluate identity data, user data, you can actually really accelerate people's user experience and make it much smoother for them too.
That's amazing. So that's like when I go on vacation or travel and they're like, you must do this again. It's because I'm being the unusual one.
Yes. And then but that's probably a case where you should authenticate again. If you go, I feel like I don't have that much sympathy for when somebody's like, I'm on vacation and I need to log in. It's like, you're in a new location. These credentials could be used by somebody else. But I do have a lot of sympathy for you're doing the same thing you do every day and we're making you auth again. It's like, well, you should get a much longer session. You should have to log in like once every couple of days. Like it shouldn't be this thing where you're doing it 3 or 4 times a day.
Yeah. Nice. Well, it's amazing that's all under the hood there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next question. Do you think passkey adoption will eventually solve the problems with authentication?
This is a spicy question. For the folks in the audience who know a lot about passkeys, they might already have opinions about this debate, but so passkeys have a really high security when they're device bound. They have a really high security properties, but being device bound means they're a little bit less usable. And so to make them more usable, platforms like Apple and other are making it so that you can sync passkeys between devices. And that kind of lessens their security value a little bit because they can be like, you could technically sync a passkey to a compromised device. And so I think there's a world in which where we're all passkey based for authentication, but because we're syncing them, there's just a new attack vector. So as the sort of beginning of my presentation shows, attackers are constantly sort of figuring out the next thing. And I think that once we move to all passkeys, which will be better than password based, there will still be ways in which attackers are trying to trick us and get around it.
Okay, so it's part of the evolving battle.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next question here I have is, why do you think device trust is so important?
Yeah, I took a moment to hammer on this in the presentation. And I think it's important because I did a lot of analysis of identity-based attacks. I read the write-up, and basically all of them start with this recommendation. Basically, all of these headline attacks, and then the FBI or CISA puts out a report that's like, what would help? What would have stopped this attack? And the number one recommendation is put phishing resistant MFA in place, or put in like a passkey based MFA, put in a cert based MFA, like things that are really stringent MFA is always number one. They say that first. But next recommendation, always the bridesmaid, never the bride, is like put a device trust, like make sure you have good device trust in your environment. And that's the thing that I think is really interesting because, like, as I mentioned, some of those, the passkeys or certs, they have deployment difficulty, but if you can do device trust, you can also add on a really significant security value. And I think it's often overlooked. So that's why I personally get a big kick out of it, is I think it's kind of like the underdog, is like people know that you should be doing passwordless or phishing resistant MFA, but I think it gets a second seat. The device trust piece gets a sort of second seat oftentimes.
Okay, so you would say like you would want to work that in more if people could.
Yeah, or just like it's another tool in the toolbox that gets overlooked. So you're like, okay, if the hammer doesn't work, but we have device, or can we get roll out some device trust, making sure that auths are coming from a trusted device? I think that's really important.
Nice. Awesome. Okay, I think we are at time. We have so many questions that went unanswered, but those will get passed over to the Duo team, and you guys can reach out afterwards. But I always like to ask, where should people go? What should they do first if they're interested, if they want to take some first steps to discover more with you guys at Duo?
Yeah, I mean, duo.com is just a great place. It has all sorts of resources. I also think our blog it consistently puts out really helpful information. Yes, there will be like product associated pieces on there, but I would say it's like 1 in 5 is a product piece, and other things are just like the relative strength of different MFA types and how to think about how different MFA can come under attack, or what it's strong against, what it's not. So I would say that the duo.com/blog has a bunch of really interesting, if you're just interested in auth, MFA, identity security, I think the Duo blog is really helpful. But yeah, I would say that.
Okay, amazing. Well, I'm going to let you go, but thank you so much for being here and hope to have you back sometime soon.
Thanks so much.
A pleasure. Take care, Ted.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. All right. So, thank you to everyone who filled out that poll. Really appreciate it. I'll have a few more for you down the line, so keep it up. Again, so many good questions that came through. We don't have time for nearly all of them. But if your question came through, no worries. We will have a way to follow up afterwards. So you won't be forgotten. You'll get all that information you're looking for. Another thing you want to keep an eye on, if you have not yet done so, is the handouts tab. So nested in the same window as your questions tab there are handouts, and each of our 6 teams presenting today have provided a handout for you. And for Duo, there is a link there to download their ebook, Securing Organizations Against Identity-Based Threats. So you can hop on over there, download the ebook for safekeeping, and give it a read when you've got a little bit of time after today. And with that, I have our first prize to give away as well. The first prize is going to be a $300 Amazon gift card. Again, you do need to be live and present here on the MegaCast to win. And without further ado, this first prize is going out to Ryan Shao from Georgia. Ryan, huge congrats. We will be reaching out after the MegaCast to let you know how you can redeem that. And again, we've got a ton of other prizes coming up over the next little bit. So keep your eyes and ears peeled. You might just be a lucky winner today. And with that, let's keep things moving along. Next on today's MegaCast, we have the team from KnowBe4. KnowBe4 has brought us the amazing Roger A. Grimes. He is a data-driven defense evangelist. And Roger, I'm just going to kick things over to you because I know you are always a blast to listen to. The stage is all yours.
Thanks for attending my yes, your password needs to be 20 characters long, and here's why. I'm Roger Grimes. If you haven't met me before, I've been doing computer security for 34 years. I've also written 13 books and 1,100 magazine articles. And the first book I ever wrote, had to be 1997 or something, was on passwords. So this is a subject near and dear to my heart. There's my latest books. The only one I don't have is that password book. The image is no longer on the internet. I'm too old. It's been too long. But I'm going to cover a lot about password attacks and defenses, and I hope do it in a better way than you've seen before. I work for KnowBe4. We're the world's largest security awareness training and simulated phishing platform vendor, meaning we help people not to be phished, which is important because that's how most passwords are stolen. And we'll talk all about that today. We're going to talk about password attacks and then password policy recommendations. I'm going to tell you what my password policy recommendations are at the beginning of this talk in just a second, and then we'll cover it again at the end so you'll understand why I make the recommendations that I do. So here's my password policy recommendations. First of all, if you can use phishing-resistant MFA instead of a password, do that. Use MFA whenever you can to protect valuable data and systems. That way, if you don't have a password, it's really hard for a password attack to be successful. But you need to use phishing-resistant MFA. And if you don't know what that means, you can click on that link I have on the screen there and go read what I mean by phishing-resistant MFA. If you can't use phishing-resistant MFA, then you need to use password, or I guess you could use MFA. And if you can't use MFA, then you should use passwords. If you need to use a password, your password really should be 20 characters or longer. If you create it, a perfectly random 12-character password prevents all known password guessing and cracking attacks. A 12-character perfectly random password, like you'd get from a password manager or something like that, defeats all known guessing, cracking attacks. But if you create your password out of your brain, they need to be 20 characters or longer. And that's because I have friends that are routinely cracking 18-character human-created passwords all the time, every day. And so if you want to create your own password, it needs to be really long. Nobody likes to use really long passwords, so that's why we say use a perfectly random password created by a password manager and MFA where you can. And we're going to talk again of why that advice is that advice. So to understand that, you got to understand the types of attacks against passwords. There's really 4 different major types. There's password theft, where someone just takes your password And they don't necessarily care whether your password's short or long. They just take it. There's password guessing where they don't steal your password, but they guess at it and try to correctly guess at it. There's password hash theft and cracking, which is a little bit like password guessing, but it's with password hashes, and we'll cover that a little bit more. And that has its own peculiarities that we'll talk about. And then we have unauthorized password resetting or bypass, and that is where they don't really care what your password is. They just reset it to their password, or they just bypass it altogether using some other mechanism. So those are the four major types of password thefts. There's lots of ways that people can steal your password. Most password attacks, the vast majority of password attacks, are passwords that were stolen, usually by social engineering. Someone gets a phishing email and it tries to trick them out of their password, but it can be all kinds of other ways. Most malware today, if it gets on your workstation, will try to steal any saved passwords that are in your browser. It can be network eavesdropping. They can steal it. They can steal it from stolen credential databases, like a lot of websites. The average person belongs to like over 170 websites that they log into each year, and at least a couple of those are being broken into every year, and their password databases or password hash databases are stolen. And there's just all kinds of ways that your password, they can just simply ask you for it. I was a penetration tester for 20 years. I used to walk up to people and go, "Hi, my name's Roger Grimes, and I'm a password penetration testing auditor. I need to know your password." And every single time I said that, I got the person's password. So sometimes all you got to do is ask. But if you're guessing at someone's password, so you don't know what it is and you have to guess at it, there's a couple different ways. The worst, slowest way is this brute force where, hey, I don't know what your password is, so I'm going to start by guessing AA and then AAA or AA and AAA and AB and ABC and so on, one at a time. That's called brute force guessing, where you're not using any logic. A far better way to guess at passwords is to realize that most people like to use words from their language in there, or their birth dates or things like that. It's called a dictionary attack, where you start with what's called a root word. It could be, your root word could be something like frog, and then you modify it and change it. The average dictionary that would contain all of the, the root words that could be used for password, the most I can think about is the Oxford English Dictionary, which is 170,000 different words. But really, the average person has a working vocabulary of about 3,000 or 4,000 words. Maybe if you're a really good linguist, 10,000 words. So that means that if you have a password hash cracking dictionary that has the 10,000 most common words, you're probably going to have in that 10,000 word dictionary the root word of somebody's password, like frog or something. And then as a password guesser, these days most passwords have to be quote unquote complex. And if they do, you're going to add some complexity to it, letters, number, uppercase, lowercase, some symbols or something like that. But it's far better to kind of use this logic-based dictionary guessing than a brute force guessing, which can be quite slow. But I really want to explain the difference between password guessing and password hash cracking, which we'll cover after this. Password guessing is somebody trying to guess at your password on an online prompt. So they find somewhere where you can log on to, or where you could log on to, like your email, some online site or service, and they begin guessing at your password either manually or using some automated password cracking tool. The maximum number of guesses they can make per second or minute is very limited. Even if there's, a lot of times if people want to do online password guessing, there's this account lockout mechanism that says, hey, if you guess the password wrong too many times, if you guess wrong, 3 times or 6 times within the same 15 minutes, it locks out the account. Or you could have just rate throttling, where forever, like in Windows today, every time you do a bad password guess, it actually makes you wait a random number of seconds before you can try again. So on most sites, there's only you can't guess that fast. Even in the best case scenario, in the best case scenario where there is not account lockout or rate throttling, and I can just guess against a computer, an attacker on average can do about 1 to 100 or so times a minute guessing, but per guessing instance. On many computers, even Windows computers or Windows servers, you can actually have hundreds to thousands of instances. So I've heard of attackers guessing like even up to 1,800 times a second. although that's actually quite slow compared to the password hash cracking that I'm going to tell you. But on average, an attacker can guess, let's say, up to 100 times per password instance, and they can have many, many instances. But really, again, it's in the thousands per minute, let's say, unusual. It's far slower than password hash cracking, which we will cover shortly. The longest online password guess that I know of, that I'm aware, and I'm sure there's probably ones longer than this, is a 10-character password called Welcome 2020. So this is, if you can find one that's been guessed, that's in the public knowledge, that's longer than this, I wouldn't be surprised. But, I would say around the longest passwords that attackers are guessing online, is somewhere, 10, 11 characters, maybe 12 characters or something like that, just outward guessing. When they did the 10-character password, they actually guessed over 100,000 times a day for over a year. I think it was like 13, 14 months before they finally guessed that password of Welcome 2020. And let me say, most password guessing tools are going to try putting the year at the end, like 20, now back then it was 2020. Today it would be like 2022 or something like that, or just the 20 at the end. Really, if there's any numbers at all, they're typically at the end. They're usually one or two or three, or the year. And if there's an uppercase character, typically the first character, it's usually a consonant followed by a lowercase vowel. So this password that they cracked, they guessed, was really within the realm of what most password guessers would think. Password hash cracking, though, is different. You can guess trillions of times a second if I get your password hash. And to do that, the attacker somehow has to get your password hash, or the password hashes you're trying to protect, and that normally takes elevated access. They have to be root or local administrator or domain administrator or something like that to get a hold of someone's password hash. But then they can take that hash back to their lab and guess at it again up to trillions of times a second. We'll talk about that. They have to have your password hash, and then they have to have some password hash cracking software. Back in the day when I was a password cracker, I used John the Ripper, if you've ever heard of that. But really, Hashcat is what almost all the attackers use today. But the attacker will then either crack your password and resell it to someone else, like a ransomware group, or they could use it themselves. And also keep in mind, especially in a Windows network, an attacker, if they get your password hashes, can reuse that to log into other sites and services and computers, even without cracking it back to the plain text password. But password hash cracking, again, the attacker gets your hash somehow, guesses at it with a password hash cracking tool like Hashcat, and then converts it back to its plain text password that they can reuse. If you're not sure what a password hash is, know that in most modern operating systems, so Windows, Linux, BSD, Unix, all that stuff, when you type in your plain text password, let's say your plain text password is frog, it gets converted and stored as a cryptographic hash. Depending on what cryptographic hash is used by that operating system. Back in early operating systems, it would be what's called MD5 hash, but that's considered weak and broken. Windows for decades used what was called the LM LAN manager hash, and that's considered weak and broken. Today, if you use a Windows operating system, it should store your password as what's called the Windows NT hash, which is considered a moderately strong password hash. If you had Linux or Apple, they used to store them as what's called SHA-1 hashes, but that got considered broken a couple of years ago by Google. So today, most modern operating systems, Linux and Unix and BSD and Apple, use what's called SHA-2, and that's definitely considered a strong password hash. And probably the strongest password hash out there is known as bcrypt. And if you have that, that's considered the strongest password hash, I think up to like 53 characters. And then at 54 characters, then something called PBK DB2 or something. I forget off the top of my head what it's called. It's considered even stronger than bcrypt for very long passwords. But again, today, what we mostly run into is Windows NT hashes and Windows systems, and SHA-2 hashes and Linux and BSD and Mac systems. And again, and the stronger ones might have bcrypt in there. Again, the attacker has to first steal your hash. They have to have some other root exploit that gives them access to your password hash. They're not normally, out there for just easy to get. They normally have to get elevated access on your system or the device they're on. So root, or administrator or something like that. Although there are a couple of attacks, and I've covered them before in other talks, where they don't need elevated access. There are some attacks that work where the attacker can get your hash without being elevated, can even do it from an email or something like that. But the idea with the password hash cracking is they get your password and then they put it into a password hash cracker. I've got one on the screen here called OptCrack. It's a Windows GUI one. I only have it here because it's kind of pretty. Really, most attackers use something called Hashcat, a Linux-based tool or a command line tool called Hashcat. It's not as pretty. But, the attacker would download the stolen password hashes into his password hash cracking tool, upload his password hash dictionary, which has a bunch of different possible passwords, and they've all been pre-hashed, and then it just does really rapid comparisons. So, not all hashes are equal. Again, landman hash, MD5, RC4, RC5, they're all easy to crack. NT hash is about in the middle, and then SHA-1, SHA-2 are harder. SHA-2 is a lot harder, and then again, PBK DF2 is a really hard one to crack, especially after, and I got it, but loses the PBK. Bcrypt is probably considered the strongest password hash out there, but it loses to PBK DF2 after 55 characters long. And actually, Windows, for some of its like its logon caches, uses PBK DF2. Some people may not know that, but anyways. How fast can an attacker guess at a password hash? It depends on what they're using. Most people guessing at password hashes are just using a regular PC or a laptop or something, and they can guess usually many millions of times or tens of millions of times per second. But there are these specialized password hash cracking rigs out there you can buy that have graphical processing units. And they can have you can buy them with up to 375 plus GPUs, and they're really good at doing password hash cracking. They can do easily trillions to tens of trillions of guesses per second. The top, most password hash cracking rigs that I know that people use guess at hundreds of millions to about 2 trillion tries a second. So ask yourself, if someone got your password hash and they're able to guess at your password 2 trillion times a second, how long would your password last? Most people's passwords would not last very long, especially when used with password human logic. But we do know that there are some top elite rigs that can guess at tens of terabytes, hashes per second. And we think that nation states and have, with a lot of computers like what a Bitcoin miner might have, can do hundreds of trillions of guesses per second. That's pretty extraordinary. And here's the wildest part. You can buy for $5 to $100 per hour hundreds of terabytes of guesses per second, which is a lot of power for $50 or $100. I would say that most passwords that you would steal from somebody, steal from an organization, are going to fall in the first day or 2 or 3 or something like that. Here's a chart that someone calculated that if you had a perfectly random, remember, perfectly random, just a bunch of gobbledygook, if you had a perfectly random password and you're using it on a rig that could do 45 trillion guesses per second, this is how long your password would last, given the different types of hashes. And what I'll note to you is that if you go down to if you see the second hash type, the NT hash, really your big difference between 10 and 11 is, so if you have a perfectly random 10-character password, it will fall in about 3 weeks to a 45 trillion guesses per second, rig. But at 11, it really takes a jump to 5.6 years, which are like, well, that starts to become uncrackable because I'm probably hopefully I'm changing my password at least every year. But if we have to assume that maybe our adversary has hundreds of trillions of guesses, and that you have a 12-character perfectly random password. I think in the public space, I don't know of anything, even an 11-character. I've never heard of an 11-character perfectly random password ever being guessed by anybody. But we're saying use 12 because that way, if there's a nation state or somebody after you, hopefully that should protect you. We hope, although you never know what nation states may have. So again, my password policy is based upon that information I just told you, including, I like people to keep in mind that most password attacks don't care how long or complex your password is. If I socially engineer you out of your password, if I steal your password, if I reset your password, if I ask you and you tell me your password, if your password's out there in a password dump somewhere, they don't care that your password's long and complex. Most password attacks, the vast majority of them do not care how long or complex your password is. They just steal them, take them, whatever, and they don't care how long or complex it is. And that's important. There's only two types of password attacks that really care that your password's long and complex, and that's password guessing and password hash cracking. And they are a far smaller percentage of total password attacks, but they're still in there. They still really do happen. And because of that, especially if you're concerned about the latter two, you need to have longer, stronger passwords. But remember, the vast majority of password attacks just don't care what your password is and will be circumvented, whether it's short and uncomplex or complex and long. And also keep in mind that if somebody gets your password hash, they, on a Windows system, Windows network, can reuse that hash without cracking it. So that's something to keep in mind. It's kind of like if someone gets your password hash, most of the time it's kind of game over because they've already got elevated access, and cracking your hash back to a password is just one of the things you need to worry about, but still. So this is what we say again here. If how long should your passwords be to be considered unguessable, uncrackable? At least 12 characters if perfectly random. But if you created in your head at least 20 characters, again, and that's because I know of people that are cracking 18 character passwords if they get your hash. Now remember, that's not from guessing. This is password cracking. If you want them not to be guessable, it's an online prompt. I'm assuming about 12 characters is long enough. But if you want it to be uncrackable, if they get your password hash, you're looking at 12 character perfectly random or 20 character long password. And let me say, nobody wants to use 12 character perfectly random. No one wants to create or use 12 character perfectly random passwords or create 20 character password phrases or something. And so instead, use a password manager, use MFA when you can, phishing resistant MFA where you can, and a password manager that will create those long wherever you can. And perfectly random means it has a high degree of entropy or randomness. A lot of people think that a complex password is something like Roger is a goon, and I uppercase a character and replace a letter by a number or something like that. Like all those two examples there, like Roger Grimes 3, that would meet the complexity requirements for most password complexity. It's not complex. Most hackers have password dictionaries that guess at those type of combinations. What you need is a truly random password. Those things look like gobbledygook, and nobody wants to create them or use them, but a password manager can create and use them no problem. Remember, a 12-character perfectly random password is a pretty secure thing. It defeats all known guessing cracking attacks. Again, the problem is most people don't want to have to create them or remember them or use them. We like to use patterns and root words and stuff like that. And again, the average human-generated complex password is an uppercase character, usually a consonant followed by a lower lettercase vowel. If there's a number, it's a 1 or 2 at the end, or it could be the year or their birth date or something. And if there's a symbol, they use, usually most people, even if given the entire PC keyboard of 101 characters or whatever, they actually use the same, I think it's the same 20, 24 characters, including symbols that you might use for complexity. It's not that hard to figure out what most passwords are. So again, Roger is here too, or Roger with a O in it or something, or 0 in it, just really not complex. So they're hard maybe to guess at, but certainly not hard to crack when you can guess, trillions of times a second. If you want to find out how long your password would last before someone cracked it, there's a lot of online password strength checking websites. I give you a couple there. Only thing I tell you is if you're going to put in your password to see how long it would take to crack your password, don't put in your real password, because you'd be giving your real password to a stranger. So like if your password's like dog32, put in cat 23 or something like that. Put in the same type of complexity of password, but don't put your real password into these websites. But if you look at one of these websites, I used howsecureismypassword.net. If you put in like the typical complex password, like Roger Gry 2, it would only take 3 days for them to crack the password. And really, to be honest with you, these days it would be less than a day. But you see that perfectly random password, 41 trillion years, and a really long password, well over 20 characters, even more than that, right? But nobody, again, wants to use these long or these super random passwords. So use a password manager instead. I'm a big fan of password managers. I think everybody should use them, when and where you can. People often wonder, well, can't they be cracked? Aren't they a single point of failure? Yes, but the same access that it takes to crack your password manager is the same password it would take to steal your passwords. And the biggest risk from not using a password manager is that people use simple passwords, use the same password for multiple websites, or use password patterns, and those will lead you to getting hacked far more quickly than using a password manager. They allow you to create, store, and use long and complex, perfectly random passwords. There's free and commercial ones. They have a lot of other cool features. People oftentimes ask me, what password manager do you like? I can't tell you. I do have certain favorites, but I will tell you Wired Magazine at wired.com has 2 password manager reviews, and I think they recommend 4 or 6 or 8 password managers, and I like what they recommend. Those are really good articles. There's an older one and the newer one. I like both of the articles, and both of the password managers, they pick, I think, at least 4 password managers they like, and I like the ones that they like. This is an example of kind of a neat feature with a password manager. I used my password manager, was letting me know that Citibank had a vulnerable password. I got this warning before I even knew Citibank was hacked. So I was at Citibank and they got hacked, and my password manager alerted, said, hey, you got a vulnerable password. I'm like, what? And I went searching on the internet, and I could not find that Citibank had been hacked, but I went ahead and changed my password anyways. And then at the last second, hours later, the news reports finally started to pour out that Citibank had been hacked and the password stolen. So I think passwords have all kinds of other cool features that you do. If you're interested in seeing if your passwords are already out there on the internet, there's tens of billions of people's passwords, login names, and passwords out there on the internet. And you can go to a website like Troy Hunt's Have I Been Pwned? PWND.com if you want. That's a great website, but we actually have a free download tool called Password Exposure Test that you can use to run against all the passwords in your organization. So it's kind of cool. Instead of doing them one at a time at Troy Hunt's Have I Been Pwned website, you can download our Password Exposure Test tool and run that against your organization, and it will go out and look to see if in your organization's login names and passwords are out there on the password dump list on the internet and also the dark net and that sort of stuff. It's a really cool tool to run. It even tell you if you have other commonly known or easy to guess passwords. Really great tool, Password Exposure Test. If you have any questions about password attacks or defenses, or really any type of cybersecurity question, feel free to email me at rogerg@knowbefore.com, rogerg@knowbefore.com, and I'll answer your question as quickly as possible. And you can also follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter, where I cover all kinds of topics, including the latest password attacks and defenses. Y'all take care and continue to fight the good fight.
All right, Roger, you are indeed fantastic. Super entertaining. I was amazed by some of the charts and figures you put up about the different lengths of passwords. So I can see why you have so many fans out in the audience. Definitely a great presentation. Unfortunately, we are at time, so we don't have time for any live Q&A with Roger. But Roger, again, thank you for being here. And anyone who asked some of those great questions, KnowBefore is going to follow up and make sure you get some information about what you're looking for. Now, that said, there is a poll up. So if you're looking for some additional information from KnowBefore about this solution, feel free to answer that poll and let them know exactly what you're looking for, what would be helpful to you. And Roger was mentioning that password exposure test, the test, for your password exposure risk, that is linked in the handouts tab. So if you want to go check that out, you missed it on the slide, you can go see if any of your organization's email addresses have been part of a data breach. It tests against 10 types of weak password related threats, as he mentioned, and it checks against breached or weak passwords currently in use in your Active Directory, and a whole lot more. So super cool way to kind of test what KnowBefore does and where you're at. Do a litmus test of where you are and where you maybe want to be. Now with that, I have a couple more prizes to give away here. So hopefully your ears are going to perk up with your name. You're going to be lucky. And reminder, you do have to be live and present here at the webinar to win. So hopefully you're here. The second $300 gift card is going out to a Mr. Mike Daniels from California. Congratulations, Mike. And the first of 3 Kindle Scribes is going out to Andrew Yaksik from Massachusetts. So again, congrats, Mike and Andrew. We are going to be reaching out after today's webinar to let you know how you can claim those prizes. And even though we didn't get time for Q&A with Roger, you still can qualify for one of those best question gift cards for the session. So keep those coming in as the next speakers come on down the line. So one final thank you to KnowBe4 and Mr. Raj Grimes. And we are going to keep things moving right along. And next in-house, we have the incredible team from Okta. Okta, we are excited to have you. We have got Megan Rastogi. She's the Group Product Manager over at Okta. And a little bit later in the MegaCast today, we are going to hear from Haiku and how there's some integration. So keep your ears and eyes peeled here with Okta. And if you like what you see, we're going to see how some of the other presenters here are working together and creating synergy within the ecosystem. All right, so Mega, take it away, and we'll follow up with you after.
Hello, everyone. My name is Megha Rastogi, and I'm a product manager at Okta. Today, I will be discussing options on how to defend your organization against phishing attacks and costly breaches. To set up some context, today's world has no boundaries on how we work, where we work, and what device technology we use for work. In fact, the definition of workforce has been evolving beyond the boundaries of just your employees who are trying to access your company resources. In fact, it now includes frontline workers, contractors, your business partners, and more. This leads to the challenge of reducing risk of cyber attacks. At the same time, it also introduces user friction and hinders any workforce productivity. At Okta, we believe that identity-powered security is the foundation of zero trust. And identity not only needs to be secured at the time of authentication, but also throughout the life cycle. And we want your workforce to safely access any technology in a boundaryless world. So let's talk about how you can do that with Okta Workforce Identity Cloud. Traditionally, organizations have had to manually string together multiple identity solutions to manage access, governance, and privilege access. This is not only time-consuming, but also very expensive. Also, imagine admins trying to write up complex policies around governance, access management, privileged access. This can lead to a lot of risk of errors, which eventually can lead to security vulnerabilities. With Okta Workforce Identity Cloud, customers will now get all these critical capabilities integrated in a single unified solution, along with all the power and benefits of our platform. And only a unified platform like ours can manage your users' access across every kind of resource, including the most privileged, so your servers, your Kubernetes, and more. So we've talked about how employees can be your greatest assets as well as your weakest link if not properly protected. So it's no secret that phishing attacks are on the rise and are widely used tactics by bad actors to steal your login and password information on a spoof site. The login and password credentials can then be used by an attacker on a real website to gain access to valuable information. As you can see here, phishing attacks have been rising year over year, but in last year, we saw the highest peak ever. In fact, 1 million plus total phishing attacks in Q3 of last year. This is a record high, and this leads to a lot of account takeover and data breaches, which is costly for your employees and your business. So phishing attacks can be categorized as identity and endpoint attacks that typically result in credential harvesting and account takeovers. Starting with our identity attacks, here, this is where an attacker is trying to trick users to get hold of their credentials. They then misuse those credentials into sites and get use of valuable information. Okta helps protect against identity attacks, account takeovers, and loss of credentials through phishing-resistant authenticators and flexible access policies. We will get into these details on how we do this in a few minutes. In addition to identity attacks, businesses also experience endpoint attacks. So these are attacks specifically on the device or the network. Either your device is hijacked or your network has DNS hijacking or malware, ransomware. Now with this, endpoint protection software can protect users' devices and malware, but Okta also helps minimize the phishing surface by having integrations with EDRs, capturing device signals to see if the device is compromised, and also denying any authentication requests from any compromised devices. In terms of identity attacks, we actually can help prevent those phishing attacks by providing our flexible policies and phishing-resistant authenticators. So how do phishing-resistant authenticators work? They actually have three main properties. The first one being there is no shared secret, so no password, no OTPs. In fact, a credential key pair is cryptographically signed, and the private key is stored in the hardware security module. This can be your TPM, the secure enclave, but most importantly, it's on the device. The second one being origin bound. A credential key pair is tied to a specific domain or a site. So using that credential on any other domain, like a phishing site, will result in an error. The third one is it's trusted. Usually in phishing-resistant authenticators, when you're doing the enrollment, you get an authenticator attestation. This helps verify that the public key is from the trusted authenticator. Now, Okta supports a wide variety of authenticators to protect from real-time credential phishing identity attacks across different platforms like Mac, Windows, Android, iOS. And these phishing-resistant authenticators have different characteristics, so choosing the right one depends on your deployment needs. So as you see here, we have our FIDO2 WebAuthn roaming security key. So that offers a very high security in terms of phishing resistant and assurance levels. It is hardware protected, but it has a higher deployability cost. These security keys are generally expensive, and there is no device context you may get with these keys. The next one is our FIDO2 WebAuthn platform authenticator, or your multi-device passkeys. Now, the passkeys can actually, they are phishing resistant, but because they can be synced to the cloud and backed up, they are not considered hardware protected or authenticator bound, and do not offer the device context. And our smart card PIV as an authenticator are usually just used in our federal settings. So it depends on your needs, what you're looking for there. Okta FastPass is your best bet. For most deployments, Okta FastPass would be great for the best user experience and security with device and location context. If being hardware protected and authenticated bound is not critical to your app access, passkeys may also be able to offer good user experience balance with roaming authenticators, such as YubiKeys for some scenarios. So let's dig a little deeper into two of our main authenticators, WebAuthn and FastPass. So how do we support WebAuthn? Okta provides the ability for admins to configure WebAuthn flows to provide a more convenient verification experience for end users, as well as provide tighter security controls across the board. This authenticator supports the following authentication methods: your hardware-backed security keys, like your YubiKey, Google Titan, your platform authenticator, that's integration into the device using your biometrics, such as your Touch ID, Windows Hello, passkeys. It is super important to offer more secure and convenient ways for end users to verify their identity. But it is also essential for admins to be able to specify which authenticators can be used to further reduce the risk. For instance, admins can reduce the risk of account takeovers by ensuring only valid and approved WebAuthn authenticators can be enrolled in their organization. This can be done through our allow list functionality. It's also important to provide ability to allow only hardware-protected WebAuthn authenticators to be used in app sign-on policies, which helps filter out passkeys and other lower security authenticators that are not hardware-backed. So these are some of the ways of how we're constantly improving our WebAuthn experience for customers. WebAuthn has limitations, as we see in the evolution of passkeys for a workforce setting. FastPass has the same security, plus a better user experience and device context. So let's dig a bit deeper into Okta's advanced phishing resistant for FastPass. FastPass is our multi-platform authenticator that meets both phishing resistant and hardware protected requirements. It also ensures authenticated permission requests are coming from the correct server while maintaining support for device context and seamless user experience. With advanced phishing resistant, when a phishing attack is detected, the alerts provide an easy way to mitigate any risks. From a phishing resistant perspective, device and its security posture plays a critical role in protecting users and their resources. Every organization needs to get work done by accessing critical apps, using plethora of devices, and many devices are not issued or managed by a company. So far, there hasn't been a really good story for enabling the device checks from a security and IT admin point of view without increasing more friction for the end user. In some cases, remote access is only available if you use a VPN and endpoint management solutions. In other cases, remote access is completely blocked on personal devices. And companies might issue a work phone that you use in addition to your personal phone. So there are very different variations of how an organization may have a mix of BYOD and managed devices. Okta now allows admins to perform device security checks for unmanaged devices. We call it device assurance. Admins can define access policies based on these device security signals that Okta Verify is able to gather from devices. So for example, if a device has been jailbroken, if it's got an older operating system, or you need a PIN code to move further, or disk encryption needs to be enabled. So this can all be specified through the policies and keep devices protected and making sure that the right user can use the right resource at the right time. So Okta does not rely on phishing-resistant authenticators alone to mitigate phishing attacks. We talked about phishing-resistant authenticators. What we really want to look at is we deploy the defense in depth principle to combine phishing-resistant authenticators with adaptive sign-on policies and evolution of contextual device signals from Okta Verify, the different MDMs, EDRs, location signals from IPs and geolocation, risk and behavior signals from machine learning and other partners, as well as unmanaged device assurance signals, which Okta Verify passes over to Okta. Admins can erode the value of stolen credentials and cookies through global and app authentication policies. Admins can create app sign-on policies for first and third-party apps, creating policies that require step-up for phishing-resistant factors and managed devices, limiting the session duration in global session policy, create session and auth policies by location, network zones, managed device. And then the fourth line of defense is our observability. So Okta security workflows, along with logging and auditing features, we can enhance remediation efforts based on security events. So for example, if you have a use case of authenticator reset scenario, where a bad actor is trying to reset the actual user's authenticator and enroll into a new authenticator, we can bring in workflows and make sure that this factor reset triggers an Okta workflow, which puts users in a temporary monitoring group for maybe 24 hours. If the user attempts to reset any other factor, it will trigger a security alert to your SecOps. And if not, the user can actually succeed. So these are some of the ways how we can offer defense in depth and protect the user from end to end. Now, we always continue to invest forward, and here are some additional investments we're making in our platform. We're investing in our phishing-resistant authenticators, FIDO to WebAuthn. We're adding more tighter enrollment controls, so admins can specify through an allow list which authenticators are allowed in their org or not. We're providing more ways to manage passkeys. We know that as multi-device credentials, multi-device passkeys are evolving, we have a constraint of not being device bound or hardware protected. And if an organization needs that protection, we have enabled blocking of passkeys at an org level. And we continue to advance that into the next stages. We're also investing in Okta FastPass. FastPass is already phishing resistant with managed and unmanaged device signals. We also introduced our smart card as an authenticator recently and are working to enhance it further for federal use cases and beyond. Second theme is about enrollment of phishing-resistant onboarding and recovery. Today, an admin can pre-enroll security key YubiKeys at Okta. However, this cannot be done at scale today, and we are partnering with Yubico to ensure that we can continue that partnership on enterprise delivery and onboarding. We're also enhancing our sign-on policy controls for phishing-resistant authenticators. We will continue to add more controls for the types of authenticators and what is allowed in the sign-on policies. Now, our key takeaways. Our main takeaways are go passwordless. So adopt the phishing-resistant authenticators, so no passwords, no OTPs that can be phished. Second, set authentication policies which are contextual, leverage the device, behavioral, and network signals so you can always know if your device is in good health and the user is well protected. And third, enforce observability and monitoring. You can deploy security orchestration through Okta's workflows to enhance our remediation efforts. We are paving a path to protect users, organizations, and their users and their resources. Join us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mega. You guys, Mega is on a bit of a tight schedule, so she is going to take off. So if you did ask a question, they might have a little bit of time here to do some live chat from the team at Okta, or they'll be following up after today's MegaCast to make sure you get any information that you're looking for. That said, we do have the poll there as well. So if you're looking for some specific items, data sheets, technical white papers, customer case studies, pricing, etc., this again is your easy button so that you can get anything you're looking for about the Okta solution. And as I mentioned, we have a really cool opportunity here today. Our final presenter of the day, Haiku, is looking at how they integrate with Okta. So you might have a kind of left hook, right hook solution working together, especially if you're already a customer of one of those two or looking to kind of build up a more integrated approach that way. So yeah, take a look there. If you haven't already ventured over to the handouts tab, you can check out the datasheet download link there for how to protect your organization from identity-based attacks. So definitely worth checking that out. And again, if you haven't already, you're probably going to want to just go ahead and snag all of those different links and PDFs and ebooks that are embedded there in the handouts tab, because a lot of this doesn't live online and maybe a little bit hard to find after. So bookmark it, download it, grab it. Tons of super awesome information here from all of the speakers, and you definitely don't want to miss out on it. Now with that, I have some more exciting news in that we have got some prizes coming in for you here. So next prize coming up is a $300 Amazon gift card. And that gift card is going out to somebody who is live, present, and lucky here on today's MegaCast. So drum roll on your desk, please. We have got the third gift card going out to Subhashish Dash from Ohio. Again, huge congrats, and we will be reaching out after the MegaCast to make sure you get your gift card. Now with that, I'm going to keep things moving along. We are about halfway, folks, so great to see all the interaction, great to see all the questions. Thank you for being here today, and I won't make you wait for our next awesome speaker. Next up in the queue, we have our friends from Rubrik. Rubrik, they are awesome. We love having you guys around. And we have Shane Allen back in the house. You may have seen him in the past. Super excited to have Shane here. He's the Senior Platform Solutions Architect at Rubrik, and we'll be chatting about how they fit into this conversation around passwords and authentication. So, Shane, why don't you kick it away, and we'll catch up after.
Thank you. In this presentation and short demonstration, we'll be going over protecting Active Directory with Rubrik Security Cloud. Let's start with a brief Active Directory overview. Microsoft Active Directory and Microsoft Intra ID provide employees with the access to everything from external resources like Microsoft 365 to internal resources like your corporate intranet. These critical services unify authentication and access control, verifying that each person is who they claim to be while ensuring they only have access to the data they're allowed to use. The data within these services are also an essential prerequisite when recovering key applications from operational failures and cyber attacks. If Active Directory is compromised and no longer reachable, none of your services are reachable and your business is at a standstill. Let's face it, Active Directory are the keys to the kingdom. 80% of cyber attacks involve identity-based techniques to avoid detection at different stages of an attack. And it takes attackers less than a day, approximately 16 hours, to reach and compromise Active Directory. And unfortunately for most companies, based on the anatomy of a cyber attack, they're only able to detect an attack after all the different stages have been completed by the bad actors and data has been encrypted. And why the need for Active Directory protection? Again, 80% of modern attacks are identity-driven. If you cannot trust your source environment, how can you restore Active Directory environment to a new OS without reinfection? And accidents happen. Users and groups can be easily deleted. How can you restore them quickly? How can you ensure that when you restore a user, all its subsequent relationships are restored as well? Think about some other questions. Are you preparing for defending at the Active Directory user level? In the event all Active Directory controllers are compromised, are you able to restore the entire Active Directory from scratch? How many different point solutions does it take to protect your entire environment? This is why traditional Active Directory protection approaches tend to fall short. They're complex, they take multiple days without proper backups. None of the users can access any resources until AD is restored, which results in business downtime. Recovering AD objects with attributes and cross relationships with other AD objects is a complex operation and takes a longer time. And the good old Microsoft AD Recycle Bin supports restores of soft deletes, but not the permanent deletions that are common in a security breach. So let's talk about securing Active Directory with Rubrik Security Cloud. It all begins with auto discovery. Simply point one of your domain controllers to Rubrik Security Cloud, and Rubrik will automatically discover and inventory all other DCs within your environment. Aside from simply discovering the domain controllers, Rubrik will also discover their associated FSMA roles, along with any crucial services they may be running, such as DHCP, DNS, allowing organizations to quickly see what domain controller is providing what services. From there, it is simple as assigning a global SLA, which could be assigned to the domain controllers, providing individual granular protection to individual domain controllers. Once an SLA domain has been assigned, Rubrik will automatically schedule and perform backups adhering to the constructs defined, utilizing Microsoft best practices and WP admin to perform the actual backups. When it comes time to recover, there are a couple different options. First, you can recover your entire domain controllers. This can be done in a few different ways. First, you can recover back to the original domain controller. This is a fast and efficient way to simply roll back a domain controller to a point-in-time backup. If the domain controller cannot be trusted, then there are options to recover to a completely brand new host as well. You can recover easily to a new domain controller containing similar hardware. This is useful for organizations that have a gold template or image they use. They can simply create a new instance of that gold image and initiate the domain controller recovery to it. And finally, Rubrik can recover your domain controller to an entirely different bare metal host as well. Utilizing Windows recovery environments, customers can bring up a new host with the similar hardware and initiate the domain restore to it. With all that said, often we don't necessarily recover an entire domain controller. If we accidentally delete a user or notice a group has been deleted, we can simply recover those individual objects rather than go through the time-consuming process of recovering an entire domain. On top of recovering individual objects, Rubrik will restore their associated relationships with other objects, so you can ensure that a recovered user has the same group memberships as they did when they were initially backed up. Let's go back to this anatomy of a cyber attack slide As I said, most organizations are only able to detect an attack after data has been encrypted. Rubrik customers for many years have been able to detect any encrypted data and been able to determine the blast radius of that data within their environments. Now, with Rubrik's Active Directory protection, Rubrik customers can now move down that kill chain and detect elevated permissions within their environment by using the metadata from their Active Directory backups. Let me show you real quick. Metadata from our Active Directory backups feed our user access feature. Why do we do this? Because DLP systems can be bypassed. User and entity behavior analytics is very heavy. With this metadata, Rubrik will help you understand where your data really is and who has access to it. Understand your data risk and mitigate it. Prioritize lists. Track changes over time. Track risk over time. And be able to remediate quickly. And have a complete track of user activity relative to sensitive data within your organization. And of course, all this happens on the backup data. There is no impact to production. Let's go over how Rubrik Security Cloud Active Directory Protection works before we go into a quick demonstration. Onboarding is simple. Install the Rubrik backup service on your domain controllers and add them as a Windows host to Rubrik Security Cloud. Next, within Rubrik Security Cloud, you must specify the SMB settings to add the on-prem Rubrik Data Vault to the domain being protected. Once added, Rubrik Security Cloud will automatically discover common services, DNS, DHCP, and FSMA roles, Schema Master, Domain Naming Master, Infrastructure Master, etc. Then an SLA domain can be assigned to the domain controllers. Onboarding and backup are quite simple. First, you have your domain controllers, Rubrik Security Cloud, and on-premise Rubrik Data Vault. It all begins with adding the Windows host to Rubrik Security Cloud that contain Active Directory. Rubrik Security Cloud discovers the additional domain controllers and inventories them. SLAs are assigned to each domain controller. With backups, a secure SMB-v3 share is created, discovered, and opened. WB admin is utilized to write an app-consistent backup. And then the SMB-v3 share is closed and the VHDX is converted to a patch file. The indexing of our Active Directory backups, we are able to create user metadata indexes that enable querying of user group memberships without the need for production access. The domain controller is backed up to Rubrik Data Vault. The Rubrik Data Vault stores the snapshot with its immutable file system. The snapshot's indexed. UMD is created and stored alongside the snapshot. The UMD is uploaded to Rubrik Security Cloud, and the user access service queries UMD to resolve SIDs to objects. Okay, that was a quick overview for the onboarding and backup, and how we create the UMD for user access from the Active Directory backups. Here are the restore options. For domain level recoveries, we have basically 3 of them: in-place recovery, alternate host recovery, and bare metal recovery. And we can also do object level recovery. And for the use case examples, for in-place recovery, maybe your OS is corrupted, or maybe you had mass object deletion. For alternate host recovery, that's good for recovery from a cyber attack or disaster recovery. Or bare metal recovery, that's basically when you maybe have a physical domain controller recovery, or virtual to physical recovery, or disaster recovery. And for object level recovery, that's always the case for accidental deletion, malicious deletion, or the occasional rogue script that went away from somebody and deleted a whole bunch of objects. Let's go over the 3 different domain recovery options. In-place recovery, the SMB-v3 share is discovered and exposed via live mount. The host restart in recovery mode and restore is initiated, and the live mount is removed and the host is rebooted. For the alternate host recovery, a new Windows host with similar OS hardware and RBS is added to Rubrik Security Cloud. The SMB-v3 share is discovered and exposed to the host. The host is restarted in recovery mode, restore initiated, and live mount removed. And for restore bare metal, the SMB-v3 share is discovered and exposed via a given IP, secured with custom credentials. And here, the VM or physical system boots into a Windows recovery environment. The path to the share is provided, and then the restore is initiated from the Windows recovery environment the host rebooted, and the live mount is removed. With 80 object level recovery, the first step is Rubrik Security Cloud calls Rubrik Data Vault APIs to browse the snapshot. The metadata containing objects within the snapshot is sent to Rubrik Security Cloud. The user selects the desired objects to recover. The snapshot is mounted to the domain controller via SMB-v3 live mount. The NTDS database within the snapshot is open and the LDAP session is established. Desired objects are restored. The LDAP session is closed and the snapshot is unmounted. And the metadata on the Rubrik Security Cloud is purged. So maybe you have a use case where the OS is infected and can't be trusted. Remember, with Rubrik's Active Directory backups, the backups are completed at the domain level, not the host level. Domain level backups can be restored to new host. If a cyber attack occurs, often the original host can't be trusted, so the restore workflow is deploy a new VM or physical host with simpler hardware, install the Rubrik backup service, add the host to Rubrik Security Cloud, restore the domain to an alternate host, selecting the newly added host. No need to restore infected operating system files. All right, enough for the slides. Let me show you a Rubrik Security Cloud Active Directory Protection demo. I think you'll like it. Okay, before I start the demo, go ahead and get out your phones and scan this QR code. It will take you to the click-through demo that I'm using for this Rubrik Security Cloud Active Directory demonstration. At the end of this webinar, we'll also provide you the URLs for the reference materials and also this click-through demo you can share with your colleagues. Okay, onboarding Active Directory to Rubrik Security Cloud. First, click Next on the Rubrik privacy policy. And we will go through the different steps of onboarding Active Directory to Rubrik Security Cloud. It starts with click on Manage Domain Controllers. Here is where we will add the Windows hosts that are domain controllers within your environment. Select the Rubrik Data Vault they'll be associated with, and then whether you've installed the backup service or need to install it, and then put in the fully qualified domain name or IP address of the domain controller. Click Add. It's that simple. From here, you'll see the Windows host added. When you click on Back to Data Protection, you will see that the Active Directory domain has been discovered, but you need to configure SMB settings for the Rubrik Data Vault in your on-premise data center. Using a user account that can create computer objects, add the Rubrik Data Vault to Rubrik Security Cloud and click Authenticate. That's it, one-time operation. Now you'll see that the domain has been added to Rubrik Security Cloud. That's it. Let's assign an SLA to the different domain controllers. So an SLA basically defines the frequency and retention of the backups. So click on the domain. Here we only have one domain controller. Click on Manage Protection and assign the bronze SLA domain. That's all you have to do is click Next. We'll automatically assign the SLA domain to that domain and we're done. And you can see here in the left-hand corner, the silver SLA domain has been assigned. Now, let's go through some restore options. In-place recovery of original domain controller. So go in, select the domain controller, click on it, open up the calendar view for the domain controller, click on the date you want to recover from, click Recover. Select Restore to original domain controller, click Next. By default, we do a non-authoritative. Since this is we have one domain controller here, select Advanced Options. And there are some acknowledgements we have to check to proceed. Click Next. And click Recover. And again, those recovery steps we went through previously. They'll be in the Events page right here. So if we want to recover to similar hardware now, very similar operation, click Next, click on Recover here, and then click on Restore to alternate host, providing the alternate host IP address. Click Next, same acknowledgements, and then click Next here, and recover. It's that simple. And again, you can watch it in the events page. Now, if you want to do a bare metal recovery, couple added steps here. So select the bare metal recovery. Click Next. In bare metal recovery, this is the Windows recovery environment that's been started. This is how you're authenticating the SMB share to the Windows recovery environment. Username, password, and IP ACL. Click Next. We're going to live mount the SMB share to that Windows recovery environment. Now let's switch to that Windows recovery environment, continue to restore there. Click Next here. Click on Continue, or Troubleshoot, sorry. System Image Recovery. Then click Next. You'll have to play with the mouse during this click-through environment for the Windows PE section, or Windows RE section, sorry. Click on Advanced. Click on Search. And this will put in the path from that SMBv3 live mount. Provide the username or password. And then click Next. Again, you might have to play with the mouse to click on Next. And click Yes. And the Windows recovery environment has begun the bare metal recovery process. Click Next. That's how easy it is to do a bare metal recovery. Now let's take an object level recovery. Scroll down to the bottom of the menu here. Click on Recovering Individual AD Objects. Click Next. Click on the domain. Go to the date and time you want to recover objects from. And then click Recover. And for here, select Granular Recovery, and then click Next. You see the date and time that the snapshot was taken of your Active Directory domain. Expand the domain. Go down to the OU you want to recover objects from. Select it. Select the object, and click Next. And here, there's some options for those objects. Whether you're recovering containers or just the missing objects. Gives you options. And click Next here. You can also recover the password or don't recover the password. And then click Next. And hit Recover. You can see the recovery process has begun. And you can go to the events page here and watch the recovery process. And that completes the short demonstration of the onboarding recovery operations for Rubrik's Active Directory backups. To recap, let's go over a few of the Rubrik Security Cloud Active Directory protection benefits. Data resilience, a SaaS solution for on-prem AD objects, users, and groups, protection against security breaches and accidental deletion, support for crucial Rubrik Security Cloud security capabilities such as air gapping, immutability, encryption, replication, retention lock, RBAC, and archival, and support for user activity monitoring and user access analysis, data recovery, recovery AD through simple search, recursive recovery messing parent objects, recursive recovery messing objects with attributes, and recovery AD as part of a ransomware recovery process, and Rubrik simplicity. SLA domain policy-based approach eliminates need for configuration of multiple jobs, tasks, and you can leverage the simplicity and unified interface of Rubrik Security Cloud with no storage to configure, no external tools to run. And here are some references used in today's webinar. A blog about defending the heart of your infrastructure, Microsoft Active Directory. A datasheet for Rubrik for Microsoft Active Directory and Microsoft Entra ID. And a web page covering Rubrik User Access Analysis. I hope you have enjoyed this webinar about Rubrik's Microsoft Active Directory protection. Have a great day. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Shane. If any of you wanted a little more time with those references to snag them on QR, feel free to do that now. I'm going to leave this up for just a minute. You also have in the handouts tab a link to the Microsoft Active Directory and Microsoft Entra ID article there. So it's the second QR if you want to grab it from there. But I'd say all three of these super awesome resources and really great blog overall over at Rubrik. So definitely you want to check those out and not miss out on those. We have a little bit of a theme here. Some of our presenters have to hop out right after they present. So Shane is not sticking around for a Q&A session today. But as usual, we will be passing on all the questions, and those questions will get answered after today's webinar. So that said, I do have a poll here. So if you are looking for some additional information from Rubrik about their solution, you know the drill by now. Feel free to plunk in what you're looking for: data sheets, white papers, case studies, pricing demos, all of that good stuff, and let Rubrik know what you would like to see from them. Now, with that, we've covered the handouts, we've covered the questions, and we have covered the poll, which means we are going to move on to some exciting prizes. Again, we do require you to be here, present live at the webinar today, and of course, lucky to win. But I do have two prizes here to give away. First is the Amazon $300 gift card, and second is another Kindle Scribe. So, with bated breath, let's hope you win. The gift card is going out to Volts Treiberg from Minnesota. Volts, huge congrats for the $300 Amazon gift card. And the scribe goes out to Danny Sava from Colorado. Danny, huge congrats as well. And as always, our team will be reaching out after today's webinar to let you know how you can get those prizes. Now, you may also be winning a $50 gift card for any and all of the sessions here today. So that means 6 options, 6 opportunities to win. And I've got our next presenter waiting in the wings here. We are super excited to have Brooke Lovat. So make sure you get your questions in here for Brooke. Brooke is going to be hanging around for Q&A with me after he presents, and you'll be able to pick his brilliant brain. Brooke is the Secure Auth Chief Product Officer, and I'm super excited to have Brooke here on with us today. Brooke, I am going to hand things over to you if you are all set and ready, my friend.
I believe I'm all set. Thank you very much.
Okay. I hear you loud and clear, so feel free to kick it off and take it away, and then I'll join you for Q&A afterwards.
Very good. All right. Hello, everyone. Let's advance the slide here and get going. Thanks. So yeah, as introduced, I'm Brooke Levitt. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Secure Auth. We provide a unified identity security solution for the modern enterprise, which I will be describing to you today as we go through our very brief presentation. We've got quite a lot of ground to cover here, so I'm going to try to keep it at a reasonably high level. Obviously, we have questions and answers at the end. So if there are things that you want to dig into there, I'm happy to take live questions at the end of the presentation, or even during, if that's allowed in this type of session. So let's talk about what are the things that comprise our solution and our offering, and the reason that we are doing what we're doing. So we find that balances between convenience and flexibility are important, but we really need to make sure that in general businesses are not weakening their security posture when they increase flexibility to achieve cost goals or to achieve lower staff goals. And that when they introduce things to create a more convenient experience for their users, that they're not doing so at the expense of that flexibility, or worse yet, at the expense of that security, right? So we need to find balance between all three of these things. So the best way to look at this is that, convenience is really about how you are able to build frictionless experiences into your applications. Flexibility is about how you're able to offer those solutions. So when we're talking about flexibility, we mean, access to enterprise systems that are deployed across clouds, across hybrid environments, across legacy environments, across, devices, smart vehicles, refrigerators, whatever that medium might be, right? In the world world of IoT and connected devices and so on. And then all the while introducing security when and where needed in order to ensure that anytime there is risk that's beyond a certain point, or risk that might be present until you have vetted a particular location that a user might be connecting from, or a particular device that they might be connecting from, you only need to introduce that friction when and where needed, right? So less compromise on security, but more convenience and flexibility all at the same time. So that's going to be a recurring theme here. Now, when we talk about our solutions in general, generally what we're looking at here are two kind of market motions, right? We have a workforce IAM market where, these are business to enterprise or business to business focused deployments. There's a few things here listed. You can see in the center of the screen here that show what are the key features of this type of offering, right? We've got the business user SSO and on and off boarding. We've got consistent UX, like single sign-on across apps and endpoints that are going to look the same and feel the same. We have the ability to introduce device trust and access to those devices. And we have the ability to offer what we call invisible passwordless MFA. Now, some of these things are kind of ubiquitous. They're available in any access management environment. But some of them are more specific to the workforce. And the fundamental dividing line here is, in a workforce scenario, you have control as the owner of those systems over the endpoint devices that are used to connect to your network. So you might allow a bring your own device scenario, but in general, you're going to have the ability to, mandate that your users install a certain set of software on those devices, or that they join an MDM framework, or that you are not going to allow access unless they use a device that you have provided, right? So that's really kind of the dividing line between the consumer IAM customer use cases versus the workforce IAM use cases. Now, in customer, again, you don't have any control over, what computer grandma uses to attach to your online site, right? To buy goods. If somebody wants to go buy cupcakes on your app, you can't control whether they're using, a particular device or an old computer with IE4 or something like that on it. So you kind of, you lose that control. So the focus here is business to consumer, business to consumer, which I'll explain more in a few minutes, and open data. Now, what these things are is ways to get to your market either directly or indirectly. So directly would be your business to consumer. That's the B2C use case. Indirectly would be what most businesses are today. That's B2B to C. So this is your business provides a service. Your service is used by businesses and potentially their partners or your other partners to get to consumers. And then lastly, open data, which is where you have a ecosystem of partners who are sort of loosely coupled by a central trust, and they enable then interaction between those applications to provide better services and more thorough services to the customers in an environment where direct partnerships may or may not have been established between those entities. So here, again, we can't control what's on the end user device, right? So we don't talk about device trust as much in a consumer IAM scenario, but what we do talk about is device fingerprinting and browser fingerprinting, which means that we can collect a lot of information about the device that the user is on, and we can use that to determine if they usually are on a device that's like this one or that is this one, or if there's some change that introduces risk. And based on that risk, we can then introduce flexible UX changes and introduce passwordless journeys and MFA journeys and consent prompts and progressive profiling and things like that based on that risk. So a few of the other things that are important here are the flexibility of the UX, right? We talked about flexibility on the previous slide. We want to really be able to provide UX control to our customers so that their customers get a look and feel and an experience that is specific and that is unique to that brand, right? They're not going to see anything about the underlying product. And we provide our passwordless solutions in SDK format so that if that business wants to provide their own mobile app, for example, maybe an integrated experience where you're on the website and your app lights up to verify that you have the phone nearby to reduce risk and that kind of thing, that's part of the offering as well. And below that, we've got delegated self-management of partners. So in a B2B2C scenario, you might have multiple partners. They might have other partners, so that the system offers like subtenancy, so that you can actually allow your customers and your partners to own their own set of integrations, both to IDPs, for user populations, for the way that applications attach. And the self-management aspect of that allows you to really kind of expand without having to hire more people to manage all of that. Now, that's made possible by fine-grained authorization, which enables us, oh, my computer just fell asleep there. That enables us to formulate relationships between these objects and make sure that businesses are attached to each other by relationship, so that you can build those hierarchies in such a way that's not necessarily going to require that there's a direct relationship between one entity and another. We can establish hierarchical relationships and so on. And of course, with this comes the need for ultimate scalability, right? The goal of any consumer-facing business is to grow as many users as it can and to have as much throughput as possible. The difference between that and a workforce is that the workforce actually might have downward pressure on usage and downward pressure on size, and they generally tend to have a more finite footprint as far as the number of people. Now, we have these two offerings, workforce and customer, and they are based on separate IDP platforms that are fit for purpose for the individual use cases that I've been talking about, but they share technologies that we provide from a central place, right? And we might provide these as like a shared code base, or they might actually be a literal, central database or a central risk engine. But here we have the cloud directory, the consent management platform, our passwordless authentication framework, device access control, including the DBFP, which is the device and browser fingerprinting framework, the risk engine, the ability to orchestrate user journeys, fine-grained authorization, and API access control. So these are the technologies that we're using to offer the breadth of these things. But at its core, the entire solution is designed to enable access to anything from anywhere by anyone that you choose, and to be managed centrally and done at the most cost-effective way possible. Now, moving on, let's have a look at what the actual B2B or B2C use cases look like from a delivery perspective. So your ability to create an instant setup here to provide access to systems is what we're after, right? This is the fastest ROI, the fastest TTV, right? Your time to value, the lowest total cost of ownership, and the best experience for your users, all with the highest levels of security. So the diagram that you're looking at here shows a user accessing a web app, a mobile app, or some kind of connected device. And when they access that mobile app or connected device or web app, it then generally will need to do work by connecting to backend APIs and services. So I think we're all aware that, breaches and attacks and, in general, the surface of attack for this type of environment is at the API layer. So ensuring that the user has been identified to the application on the front end is not enough to really claim victory in the zero trust architecture framework here. You have to be able to control access to those APIs and services based on the established credentials that you've, grabbed as part of that mobile SDK or as part of that web app or connected device. And we have to be able to validate that access token or whatever medium has been created there is valid for the transaction that they're making. So an example would be a user signing in is not necessarily just going to be able to identify themselves and then make like a monetary transfer between two accounts, right? We need to make sure that A, the user owns those accounts, B, the user has provided consent to transact between those accounts, and C, is authorized to make a transfer of that amount of money, and maybe there is enough money to do that. And these types of authorization requests can be validated by our micro-perimeter authorizer, which exists at or near the API service, but connects directly to our central SIAM service, giving you the ability to provide a full-scale access control environment that achieves zero trust by authorizing every sensitive transaction, but all the while gives you dynamic control over the UX that the user goes through and when they see a consent prompt or a prompt for multi-factor authentication based on our AI ML risk assessments that are occurring on each one of those requests. So if we move to the next slide here. So when you build these environments, like the one I just described in the previous slide, a lot of times this is happening because you have businesses that are either being combined together, such as through an acquisition or merger, or we have users that are being reached at different places. So you have, potentially populations of customers that are being pulled in from different areas. And a lot of times those customers or those, groups of people are coming from a particular IDP, and that might be a social media provider such as a Facebook or X or Google. It might be a provider from another business that could be using something like Microsoft Entra or Okta or other IDPs that are out there that are providing direct IDP control for those users at the partner site. Or it could be, a public identity provider, such as like a state ID or something like that, where you've got, a state sign-in, or a login.gov is a good example of that. Now, when users come in from those identity providers and need to access these systems, it's critical that we're able to provide a central, harmonized experience for the user without having to be concerned with where they came from. So the way we do that is by working entirely on an ephemeral object that is created in real time representing the user. Now, you do have the option in the center of this drawing to apply all of the technologies that I've described already. So this includes, starting at the top right, the dynamic policy-based authorization. It gives us the ability, moving clockwise around that circle, to provide FGA and entitlements through our Zanzibar relationship graph, which is what we're talking about when we say FGA, right? It's a relationship graph that defines the relationships between the users. We have the ability to look up users who exist already in our directories of users, which we call identity pools. And we also have the ability to dynamically provision inbound users and keep those users up to date by pulling information in from that ephemeral object that represents the user and putting it into the identity pool. We can, as I discussed before, fingerprint the browser or device. We can then determine, based on risk, whether the user needs to go through an additional MFA. And then also, based on policy, determine whether they need to go through additional consent or privacy prompts in order to do what they're trying to do. So the idea is that all of those features are available to you as a part of your user journey, regardless of how the user signed in, where they came from, what partner they're associated with, giving you the ability to unify and harmonize your app UX across your ecosystem. Now, once the user has gained access and has an authorization token to either access the system or to perform a certain transaction, that token can be validated against our system, and it can be validated by backend APIs and services. It can be validated by connected devices using things like device code flow. And of course, it can be used by web and mobile applications to perform actual UX interactions on the screen. Okay, so moving beyond this, we talked a little bit before about B2B to C, so business to business to consumer. Another way to say that is B2B CIAM. This is something that you're going to start seeing more and more of, in the marketplace if you're not already familiar with these terms. Essentially, what this means is you have businesses, as I said before, that are doing business through other businesses. So a great example of this that everybody can understand, I think, at this point would be like a food delivery service, right? Imagine you have a service, like a Uber Eats or a Grubhub or something like that, right? We'll just make one up for the moment. We'll call it GrubDash, right? So at GrubDash, you have an app and the user uses the app. The user orders food. Now, the system actually has to place an order at a restaurant. It has to get a driver to go and get it, and it has to use a third-party platform to perform the payment. Now, all of those systems are disconnected, and the information that the user provides to the application is not all needed by all of those entities, right? The restaurant doesn't need to know where you live. The driver doesn't need to know what you ordered. The payment company doesn't need to know which driver delivered it, right? And they don't need to know, what you ordered. They just need to know how much the payment was. So this information needs to be controlled and sent to different places. And in that setup, the end consumer is actually consuming the GrubDash service, but they're not direct consumers of what's being provided by the restaurant, by the payment platform, or by the driver themselves. Now, as one of those sort of root organizations, you may have multiple customers or multiple partners that service direct customers. And because of that, you need to grow your business by enabling your partners to control the way that they attach to the systems without having to manually manage the way that they do that. So you can see on the very right-hand side here, and I know this slide is a little bit rearranged by the formatting, but on the organizational management tab there, you can see that we have multiple businesses. Now, these are within one tenant, right? We have multiple organizations, and those organizations have sub-organizations. Now, those sub-organizations can also have organizations beneath them, and there's a hierarchical management scheme. So from Logistics Co., that company can, has administrators that can manage the users that are coming in from the delivery company. And they can also manage users that are anywhere below them in the tree. And users from the delivery company have no visibility up into the logistics company broadly, and administrators from the delivery company have access only to the information below them in the tree. So this gives you really the ability to grow your business without expanding your headcount, right? It gives you the ability to kind of push out those boundaries. Now, the way we do this, of course, is through the relationship graph that manages the way that these entities are put together, and it gives you full control of your users, your policies, your applications, and basically how your identities move through the system without having to micromanage that at a partner basis. Now, moving on. Now, when we talk about B2C environments and B2B2C environments, we need to start thinking of this in terms of what we call omni-channel experiences, right? So, we have a lot of customers that are in retail. Some of them are pretty big organizations that might have direct-to-consumer relationships where the consumer might use a mobile app or a website or an in-store shopping experience to get the same goods and services on a pretty regular basis. And they might be able to use multiple different types of identity to get what they need to get, right? So here we have, the ability to sign in with digital verifiable credentials, social media IDs, and that sort of thing. We have the national IDs, decentralized IDs, and that sort of thing. The direct consumer is going to want a good sign-in experience for the mobile apps. They're going to need MFA for sensitive transactions and that sort of thing. And they're going to need also to be able to authorize payments through their mobile app to make in-store payments and to make sure that they get loyalty credit and the same types of incentives for in-store purchases that they get for web purchases. Now, all of these purchases, short of the ones that actually, are in store where you collect the item from the store, are going to result in an API call that either creates a soft product order fulfillment, such as like something you order that's, like a piece of music or something like that might be delivered electronically, or a physical order fulfillment. So if you ordered socks, those socks can be delivered to you. And those APIs in an omni-channel environment need to be open. And that openness, right, that open ecosystem where third-party channels can then use those APIs and they can then create indirect consumer channels that you can delegate control of to those partners, gives you the ability to take your business from direct B2C to indirect or B2C SIAM without really changing anything about the infrastructure itself. So this drawing kind of illustrates all the different, points of contact here that you'll have, between the indirect consumer, the direct consumer, the partners, and how those orders are all fulfilled online. Our platform, obviously doesn't provide all of this for you. A lot of this is infrastructure that you get, kind of as part of your order fulfillment, APIs, and you need to build your websites and that sort of thing. But what we do provide is the ability to provide authorization and access control across every point in this journey and a way to delegate and manage the subtenancy for those partners, even in very complex ecosystems. All right, now, if we switch gears here and talk about the workforce offering, this is where we're talking about employees and contractors who are kind of closer partners, right? So instead of talking about providing many different types of people access to one web property via multiple channels, what we're generally talking about here is providing a core set of people, a defined set of people who have access already to a set of applications using one unified solution, right? So here you can see that there's like the tiles screen on both the mobile app and the laptop image on the bottom left there. We have the ability to provide sign-in directly to this system from the desktop login screen. So you can see like the Windows screens there on the screenshot. This is supported on Mac OS and Linux as well. We can perform risk-based MFA for access to those devices and to that launchpad. And what I mean by that is, imagine a scenario where you're sitting at your desk, and generally, you have your phone, you've signed into your phone in the last few minutes, and your phone is next to your computer. This might sign you in with only your fingerprint or only your Face ID into your laptop at that point. Now, imagine a scenario where you go across the street to Starbucks or something like that, and you try to sign in again, or you left your phone at Starbucks and you're back at your desk. In that scenario, the system can detect that A, your phone is not near your computer, and B, it can detect that the location of your phone that has this MFA app installed on it is not close enough to you physically where you're signing in from to receive a low risk score. And what that means is it would then send a push MFA message to the app and force you to go through that journey, meaning you got to go get your phone from Starbucks before you can sign into your laptop. So, these things are very flexible and configurable, but that's kind of the way the system is designed to work. Now, from a single sign-on perspective, we're getting people access to things with a single click, right? But we can determine on each of those clicks what the risk is and introduce adaptive MFA and start to learn about what the user is doing during those transactions. So if a user never clicks on, a particular link, and today they've clicked on it, we might take that as an increased risk factor and prompt for MFA just to make sure that this person is who they say they are. Another thing is, performing user self-service, being able to reset your password or change your password. These are usually treated as sensitive transactions, right? Things that we want to make sure that we are really sure about before we allow someone to change the root credential. And then we want to make sure that, when you're presenting these screens to your partners, to your employees and your contractors and so on, that you're able to make sure they are comfortable with the brand, that the screens that they're seeing match the branding and the look and feel that they're used to, that they do not appear to be outside of the system, and that they're not scary, right? They have to be kind of part of the user experience that you're having. Now, as far as, the way that the risk-based MFA works, I talked a little bit about how you prompt users for MFA, but there's a lot of options with regard to what multi-factor mechanisms you actually use, right? We can do a push where you just say, yes, I accept. You can do a push and require that the user matches a symbol that they see on the screen with something that's not, that's on the app, and make sure that they pick the right one in order to kind of do that bi-directional protection. We can do this through PIN, or we can do it through Face ID on the mobile app. And in a lot of cases, if the mobile app has been signed into recently, we can just do an invisible MFA, where essentially the application just does a kind of hygiene check. It notifies you that you've been MFA'd. It knows where you are. It knows where it is. And it just allows you through without actually making the user do anything, right? So it performs this invisible hygiene check of the general user environment. Okay, so moving on here. I've discussed here what the core solutions look like, and what we're offering here. And on this slide, we're going to talk a little bit about what are the reasons that our customers use our product, right? Why do customers love SecureAuth? The biggest things here are security, right? We do nothing but access control. All we do is produce products and provide solutions that provide you access to services, whether it's workforce or customer identities, everywhere from any device to any instance on any type of environment. So it's not something that's a side business for us. It's the only thing that we do. We eat, sleep, and breathe this every day. User experience is critical. We know that the most important thing in security is making sure that people use it, right? We don't want people avoiding using systems because they're too complicated, and we don't want people writing passwords down and turning down the security controls and tuning things down because their users complain that they're difficult, right? So being able to offer tailored, personalized experiences that are effortless for the end user, but secure for the business are really important. And then lastly, flexibility is critical. We understand that our customers have enterprise ecosystems that are deployed across cloud, hybrid, legacy, on-premise, and multiple other, future-looking platforms where, it's important to be able to deploy our product and to access our product from all of those places. We offer our product as a deployed solution. We offer it as a public SaaS, as a private SaaS. You can really kind of mix and match the way that you run it. In most cases, we're charging for the platform on a basis of consumption or user count, not based on the number of instances that you have deployed. So being able to deploy the product across multiple environments and, whether they're on-premise or in the cloud or managed or otherwise, gives you that flexibility to move forward and to shape your business the way that you need to shape it. All right. That is it for the presentation, and we can move on to questions.
All right. Sounds great. Let's dive right into it here. First question here I've got is, how does Secure Auth deal with credential harvesting attempts?
So credential harvesting, the screen just changed. I don't know if I did that.
Oh, that was me. I just threw up our poll, so if anyone wants to start plunking in their requests, they can do that there.
Yeah. Okay, so credential harvesting, when we talk about preventing it, there's a number of different things that can be done. First of all, the way that credentials are generally harvested is, through phishing or through data breaches where you get the actual information, right? Then there's like this password reuse or, credential stuffing attacks where we have customers frequently see data that has been purchased on the dark web. Like, for example, there'll be a large breach, a few years ago at XYZ, provider, and those those accounts are then attempted at multiple websites, right? And so large retailers, large financials, and so on, will find that their users are often, there's attempts to sign in, and some of those are successful. So the first thing that we need to do is make sure that a user who's signing in an irregular manner is not able to get access to the system. That's where multi-factor comes in, and that's where the risk-based solution can be certain to introduce that additional friction when the attacker is making requests from somewhere new, right? Somewhere different, a different type of device than the user is using, and that sort of thing, right? Now, the next thing is that when the user, if a password login is attempted and it's successful and we've stopped it with MFA, we still need to make sure that we understand that password has been breached. And we do two things there. One is we can detect that the MFA was aborted or failed, which means that the user will not be allowed to sign in to anything with just their password at all until they can get past a multi-factor. And secondly, we have a feature that allows you to actually notify customers of password breach that's actually going to be available here very shortly in a month or so, that uses not only the data that we've collected, but also data input from a third party that, essentially provides a database on a daily basis of passwords that have been breached. So we will be able to do a sweeping check of a user credential as they sign it. Hopefully I'm answering that in the right direction for the person who asked it.
Yeah, hopefully. If not, we can have them follow up. I think we have just maybe 2 minutes here as we push up against time. So I'm going to ask you one more question. So final question here is, does SecureAuth support VMs and or VDIs for login authentications and onboarding, offboarding employees or users?
So the first part, VMs, VDIs, yes, absolutely. So we have a very robust solution for access to the VDI environments. Many of our customers are using Citrix and systems like that. We actually have a completely passwordless journey that's available for VDI environments, and we have some very large organizations that are deploying that or have deployed that globally using our system. And what's really nice about it is that you're able to do a completely passwordless journey. Like, so there is no PIN, there is no password. You have to have previously registered your mobile device. And then the first time you see the VDI login, it essentially just does a QR code login and then a push to your phone for the multi-factor. And based on risk, it can eliminate those factors, right? So when you bring up your VDI and you need to log in, it can do a location trust policy where, you know, your risk is higher if you're outside of a certain radius of distance. And, you know, there's a million other different things that you can use to determine access. Like, what is the system that you're running on? Are you on a trusted IP? Has your credential been compromised, and that sort of thing? So yes, fully supported. That's actually one of our strongest points in the workforce is support for passwordless on VDIs. The second part of the question, can you remind me what was it?
Essentially, the VDIs for login authentications and the onboarding, offboarding of the
onboarding, offboarding. That's right. So keep in mind that our solution doesn't do any provisioning, right? So yes, we can offboard people as far as creating them in the directory, in our directory. We can associate them with groups, we can associate them with relationships, and we can include them in policies and exclude them in policies specifically as needed. However, our solution is not a governance solution. We're not a SailPoint type solution where we're going to be actually provisioning users into another another system or pushing those accounts down. You can certainly use triggers from our system to do that, but we are not the provisioning point. We're purely for access control.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much. We are at time, so I'm going to let you go, but great to have you on and looking forward to the next time we get to hear from you.
Yep. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Brooke. Alrighty, so if you haven't already, do check out the handouts tab and make sure you go get the PDF of customer case study highlights. I know one was mentioned there in the presentation, but there are a bunch and definitely worth a read, and you don't want to miss out on that opportunity. We also have a prize to give away. Our 5th gift card is going out to Michael Ferber from Massachusetts. Michael, big congrats on the $300 Amazon gift card, and we will be following up with you on how you can redeem your prize after today's MegaCast. Now, we have one final presenter here today who is going to be wrapping up the MegaCast. Super excited to have the Haiku team back in the house. We have Mark Niemeyer. He's the Senior Director of Product Management at Haiku, and he is going to be chatting about Haiku, but also how they work a little bit in tandem with Okta. So I'm excited about that. And don't forget, do throw in all of your thoughtful questions for Q&A, because we will have Mark here to answer some questions and let us pick his brain after he presents. So with that, I'm going to send Mark out onto the stage here. Mark, are you ready to take it away?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Perfect. Hello, everybody. Like the announcer already said, my name is Mark Niemeyer, part of the product management team here at Haiku. I'm going to talk about the implications of basically security, identity, and so on, and really talk about if something happens, if there are changes in configuration, whether those are accidental, malicious, ransomware related, and talk through how you can protect yourself against things like that. I talk to a lot of customers, and people really start to realize it's not if something happens, it's more when something happens with those attacks, with those breaches, and so on. So really important to have a good plan, a good strategy in mind. as I said, I'm part of the product management team here at Haiku. Let me first start with who Haiku actually is. Haiku is a relatively young company. We started about 10 years ago, and we started developing data protection solutions, really backup and recovery for on-prem infrastructure. So think of solutions like VMware, Nutanix, and so on. And we've built that out. We built that technology out to first include public cloud backup and restores, build it native solutions for those platforms. But most recently, last year, we have released what we call our cloud. And our cloud is basically taking our data protection engine that we've matured over the last 10 years with about 4,200 customers worldwide. But we've now adapted this so our customers can start using it to protect applications that are running in the cloud as a native application. So SaaS, PaaS, DBaaS applications. Like I said, we have about 4,200 customers worldwide, about 78 countries that we are transacting in, and really focused on data protection. We have a very nice set of investors behind the company, Bain Capital, Acrew, but also investments from companies like Atlassian and Okta. So really highlighting the fact that they see the value of having data protection of data, of configuration that is sitting in the cloud. One of the things that I'm very proud of is our NPS score. As you probably are aware, the NPS score shows how happy people are with the product and with support and so on. We've consistently scored 90 or above over the last 3-4 years, ever since the company started measuring this. So very happy customers, very good product and so on. And we are part of the Gartner Magic Quadrants. We're in the visionary quadrant right now, but you can see we're very well positioned to basically start disrupting the markets. If we look a little bit around, right, and I think most of you are in some shape or form and show some progress of the digital transformation, right? Going from an on-prem environment into the cloud, maybe multi-cloud and so on. A lot of customers that I talk to say they have fully embraced hybrid cloud, and most of them are actually using multiple clouds.
Hey there, Mark. I'm not sure if it's just me, but I think we might have lost your audio here for a sec. I just wanted to see if maybe you can do a quick refresh or make sure you've got the right mic hooked up there. Let's do a little tech checking quickly for everyone out there in the audience if you're also having the same issue.
All right, I've done a refresh. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect.
Awesome. Maybe just jump back 15, 20 seconds from the top of that slide there.
All right. So let me recap this slide really quickly. So a lot of companies I talk to, they are in the process of moving to a hybrid cloud. A lot of them are already using multiple clouds. But the surprising thing is that the average enterprise within the US is using something like 200 to 250 different SaaS applications, right? And if we look at the progression of basically the evolution of IT 20 years ago, everything was running on-prem, right? So for an IT administrator, for a backup administrator, it was very easy to track who is using what is being used. But as time has progressed, and with the advent of SaaS applications, a lot of those business applications that used to run in the data center now run somewhere within the cloud, right? And the other fact is that only 50% of applications are actually managed by central IT, right? So if you are responsible for data protection, how can you protect something if you don't even know that it's running within your organization, right? So it's very important to have a good visibility on all of those applications, all of those data sources that are being used in the organization. And that's why we have developed together with Okta, on top of the Okta platform, we've built a tool that helps with the discovery of those SaaS applications. And we call that tool rGraph. We basically leverage the information that is stored within Okta, as well as Entra ID, by the way, to provide a very clear picture of all of the applications that are being used in your organization. Right? So we can give you a very nice graphical overview of what department is using what tools and so on, and if they are protected, if they are important, if they have important information, and if they fall away, or if the data gets changed or hijacked or encrypted, how much of an impact that will be on your organization, right? So in one glance, basically, we allow you to assess the risk of all of those data sources, and we can actually give you a score at the organization level, both at the departmental level, but also at the organization level. So somebody like your CIO, your CISO, your head of IT, in one glance, they can see how they're doing. Haiku, of course, brings protection for those applications as well, right? So let me dive into there. First of all, we are, like I said, we are invested by Okta Ventures, right? So we're working very closely together to extend the Okta platform. I did a webinar a couple of months ago, so I stole some of the slides over there, reused some of the slides over there. Right? Really, Okta, as everybody is aware, they're very much committed to your identity security. And they have built a very nice platform. Identity is mission critical. So they are responsible for making sure that service is always up and running. Really a platform built for trust, right? In the end, you have to trust who comes in through the front door, who has access to what applications, what data sources, and so on. And of course, they are architected really, really well. They're architected for fault tolerance. If something within their stack goes down, they can recover really, really quickly. They're also architected really well for disaster recovery. So if one of the cloud zones, the availability zones goes down, they can do a very quick failover to a different part of that cloud stack, whether that is East Coast, West Coast, whether that is into a different continent and so on. They actually have the ability to set up free zones that are all basically in semi-active mode and so on. But the thing that they don't really have protection for is data and configuration that is stored within Okta, right? So if somebody goes in and makes changes within Okta that is kind of goes in through a regular API connection or a regular user account, they typically cannot help you undo those changes, right? And they call this the shared responsibility model. So customer configuration, like data, like configuration and so on, in the end is customer responsibility. Even though Okta does backups of their entire organization, they cannot use that to do rollbacks of customer initiated changes, right? And so if you think about it, the data and the configuration within Okta is very, very critical to your organization, right? What if your employees could not access critical applications? What if all of your IT staff loses access to all of the IT applications that you're using? What if they can give themselves access to very critical, very sensitive information, right? So very large risk of operational disruptions, recovery cost, lost revenue, lost productivity, and in the end, it might even cause your reputation to have damage. In the end, you have to realize that Okta or any security identity system is really the gateway. It's like the front door to your entire estate, right? So you have to think about what are the things that could go wrong with Okta, right? Operational data loss, outages, and cyber attacks, right? Very apt, very much a sign of the times. There's even things like ransomware as a service that people basically pay like $100 to a company somewhere on the dark web, and they can go out and basically start attacking organizations in a very structured way. But then there's also an angle of security and compliance. Right? A lot of people have to show that they have copies of their data, of their configuration, especially in Europe with NIS2 and DORA coming up. a lot of those applications that are running in the cloud, you have to show that you have backups, that you have a way of quickly recovering. Remember this picture that I showed you, right? So basically, we are focusing. Haiku is focused on protecting that customer configuration and the customer data, right? So our solution makes it very easy to set up automated backups for Okta configuration. It's basically give us a service account, give us an API token, right? And we assign a policy, what we call a backup policy, to the Okta instances that we discover, right? So really, it's a set and forget approach. You basically can set it up within 5 minutes, and now you have automated backups that run in the background. We take care of that in our data protection as a service stack. They can run 24/7. They can run multiple times per day if you have a need for that. The power of our solution really comes in when something goes wrong, right? If somebody makes an accidental change, deletes an application, deletes a policy, deletes an application assignment, and so on, or if somebody, like maybe even a disgruntled employee, starts making changes because he knows he's getting laid off at the end of the month or at the end of the week, and he hasn't lost his access yet. And ransomware, of course, is a very important driver for having protection for your Okta configuration. The Haiku solution allows you to do very granular restores. Of course, we can restore the entire Okta instance, the entire Okta configuration. But if somebody goes in and deletes one policy, I can basically hit the undo button for that. In just a few clicks, in just a few minutes, I can restore that policy, whether that was from a backup from yesterday, or I can restore the policy based on a backup that is maybe 2 or 3 months old. But it also helps Haiku also helps with long-term data retention. We can take copies of the Okta configuration, store it on storage that you own, that you manage, that you pay for. Right? Haiku does never want to store customer data because that basically breaks the data governance picture over there. So we always go back to storage that you own, that you present to us. And there you are in control over the long-term retention. You can set up a protection policy, a backup policy to keep copies of your Okta configuration around for multiple years. Right? So from a compliance perspective, it's really an easy checkbox. And then with our graph, like I talked about already, you have complete visibility around what is running out in your organization, who has control over backups and restores of all of those data sources as well. Right? So RBAC is completely built into our solution. And then, so if I do one click further, we go much broader, we go much further than just Okta, right? As you can see, all of these solutions, all of the icons, all of the logos that I have on the screen over here, we actually can protect for you. So if we detect the use of these applications using our graph, using basically browsing the Okta configuration data, we can protect all of these applications that are running within your organization in very much the same way as we do for Okta. Just assign a backup policy, give us an API token, and we will take care of the backups and provide very granular restores. Very elegant architecture, very pluggable. So every month we can add 2, 3, 4 more applications that we now can protect. So our marketplace is always growing with new applications. So kind of concluding over here, wanted to recommend 5 ways to basically think about security for your identity environment and so on, right? First of all, bring Okta to life, bring your identity stacks to life. Use our graph built on Okta, built on Entra ID to basically discover those applications and give very important critical information to your CIO, head of IT, and so on. But also, and you've heard this earlier today, this is just part of a multi-layer design, a security design, right? Of course, you need to have very active security measures around your entire data estate, right? Identity is one of those critical pictures, firewalls, things like that. But in the end, like what I started with, it's not if something happens, it's when something happens. if somebody gets in and if somebody starts changing access and so on, you need to have a known good last copy of your configuration that is stored on storage that you own, that is encrypted with keys that you own, that might even be enabled with what we call worm. Basically, at the moment the backup is written, nobody can touch that. Nobody can encrypt it. Nobody can delete that backup until the timer runs out. So really a nice piece of storage technology that helps you protect and keep that known good copy of your configuration around. Really extending the platform of trust that I was talking about, right? Okta has done a very good job in making sure that their stack is resiliency. We're basically providing the next step and providing resiliency against maybe even an oopsie moment, right? Somebody going in and clicking the wrong button and clicking yes without even thinking about it, right? So really providing data resiliency from any kind of outages, from any kind of cyber attacks across the entire data estate, right? Not just Okta, but many, many more. I think we're up to like 65 different SaaS applications that we support today. And then the last piece, I think we can all smile about that. Sleep well at night, right? In the end, we want to go to bed and not have to worry about the bad guys that are hanging out in the dark web and trying to get into your company and trying to disrupt. There's so many good examples over the last few months that kind of have reached the news around ransomware being very effective, causing multiple millions in payouts and so on. So what's next? Definitely want to encourage you to check out our free trial. We always provide rGraph for free. You can sign up for an instance, an account within Haiku R Cloud, and get access to rGraph. You can hook it up to either Okta or your Entra ID environment, and we'll show you that nice graph that I was talking about. But you can also try out protection for Okta. We provide you a 2-week free trial. That is very easy to set up. We don't need any drivers. We don't need any agents. You don't need to run anything on-prem. It's just click and go. So basically sign up for your account. Give us the service account for Okta, a sign-up policy. That's all you need to do. Within 5 minutes, basically, you are protected. With that, let me see if there's any questions that came in while I was talking.
Yeah, we've got some questions in the queue for you. So let's dive into it. First, I want to say that 90 MPS score is nuts. A previous company I worked with, they were aiming for 70, and that's actually seen as pretty good. So you guys are really well above the industry standard, I think, on that.
Very proud of that, yes.
Amazing. Well, people should definitely check out the free trial. Then they can experience this high touch customer goodness. I'm just going to throw up that QR here for a sec if anyone does want to grab that trial, and then I'm going to flip over to the poll as we go through some questions. But let's dive into the questions. First one I've got for you is: can I use HiQ to restore into a different Okta account?
Actually, yes, I didn't talk about it in my talk thread, but yeah, we built in fairly recently. We built in a capability of basically taking the backup from instance A and then restoring that back into instance B. So that unlocks some really interesting use cases like sandbox, Q&A environments, maybe even like mergers and acquisitions and so on are possible with that. So yes, the answer is yes, we can do that.
Okay, awesome. Next thing is, how fast can I do a recovery in case something goes wrong?
Yeah, so I get that question a lot, right? And I show this a lot in demos and so on. And if you're interested, feel free to reach out to me on like LinkedIn or as a follow-up. Basically, within a few clicks and within a few minutes, I can provide an undo button for any kind of change that you have within your organization. Of course, if you're a very large tenant with lots of users and you need to do a full restore, it will take a little bit longer. But for any kind of undo operations, it's just a few minutes.
Awesome. Next one here from Phil is: can I take a backup manually before I make some big Okta changes?
Yes, of course. So our policies provide automated backups, right? So whenever the schedule basis reaches it, we'll start a job and make sure that you hit your RPO goals. But if you want to, if you're planning to make a big change within Okta and you want to basically grab a backup, of course we have a way of starting that. And within a few minutes, you can basically prepare yourself and have a rollback point if that configuration change is not successful. Good question.
Question here is about, say, like Okta. Do I need to have, is Okta the only way to work with Haiku, or what other options are there?
Yeah, so from a discovery perspective, today we integrate with Okta and Entra ID. Right? But of course, from a protection perspective, we protect a lot more different SaaS applications. Like I said, we're up to something like 65 or 70 different data sources, and every month we're releasing another one or two. So really continuously improving, continuously expanding our marketplace.
Nice. Okay, this is a question from Steve. It's a little bit long, so just buckle in. He's saying, we already have Okta for single sign-on, however, it can be exploited by hackers who use it to log into a site recurring just a compromised password, then use SSO to gain access to other sites and applications that would normally require MFA. What is the best approach to mitigate or prevent such threat?
Yeah, so one of the things we provide is kind of change detection, anomaly detection. So if we notice that Okta accounts have changed, or there's a lot of account creations or account deletions, or even assignments for applications and so on, we will actually notify our customers, our IT admin, saying, "Hey, we think something is going on. Can you have a look at that?" So I would say that is one of the ways that we can provide detection there. Of course, like I said, we're just part of a multi-layer approach, right? So of course you have different tools that can help you actually doing more of an acute detection of those kind of changes.
Awesome, perfect. So of course there's the trial, but is there any other way to get like a case study or see a demo somewhere if people are wanting to get a little sense of what's under the hood, or is the best way just to dive in and do that demo with you guys?
Yeah, so a couple of resources that are available. Of course, the handout, right? So it's a data sheet, it's a solution brief for our Haiku for Okta solution. I would definitely encourage you to go to haiku.com, hycu.com. And then on the top left, there's products, and you can basically find our Okta solution. There's a short demo video there. There are data sheets linked over there. There are some customer case studies, linked over there as well. So all of that information is available online at haiku.com, hycu.com.
Okay, awesome. Well, with that, we are going to wrap things up, but is there anything else you want to leave the audience with? I know we've kind of pointed them to some resources, but any bragging moments, any mic drop that you want to say before we wrap this MegaCast?
No, I think it was great being here. Thank you for the organizers and giving Haiku another spot. I hope today was very, very useful. I know it's been a long session and so on. You probably learned a lot. And yeah, like I said, haiku.com is the place to be. That's where all of the information is. I hope everybody has a great rest of the week.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Pleasure to have you on, Mark, and enjoy the rest of your week as well. And we'll look forward to having you on again.
Thank you.
Cheers. Take care. Alrighty, everyone out in the audience there, thank you once again for tuning in, checking in on this incredible topic, wrangling passwords, authentication, and identity, keys to success. If you have not yet hopped over to that handout tab there, make sure you do. Mark mentioned for Haiku the rCloud platform PDF, little 2-pager in there. It's for see, protect, and restore your mission-critical Okta data. Grab that if you're interested, and grab all of those other handouts and links and save them before we wrap things up in just a couple minutes. If you haven't answered this poll here, again, please plunk in your response of any additional information that you'd like to see about the Haiku solution. You can do that now. And I do have a couple final prizes to give away. So again, thank you for being live and present here on the MegaCast. So great to have so many of you. So great to have so many comments and questions. And let's reward that with some prizes. So our sixth and final $300 Amazon gift card is going out to Rohit Kalasani from Massachusetts. And the third and final Kindle Scribe is going out to Tyler Spaeth from Minnesota. Again, we are going to have our team reaching out to make sure you know how to claim these awesome prizes. And for all of you who did send in those awesome and thoughtful questions, you may just be selected for one of those 6 $50 best question gift cards as well. So again, thank you for that. I'm going to quickly recap all of the winners in case you stepped out or stepped away for a second. So the first gift card went to Ryan Shao from Georgia. Second to Michael Daniels from California. Third to Subhashish Dash from Ohio. Fourth to Waltz Treiberg from Minnesota. Fifth, Michael Ferber from Massachusetts. And Rohit Kalasani from Massachusetts. The 3 scribes went out to Andrew Yaksik from Massachusetts, lucky placed. Danny Sava from Colorado, and finally to Tyler Spaeth from Minnesota. Congrats again, and we will be reaching out. If you are on the webinar today and you would like to chat with us about presenting on a future summit, EcoCast, or MegaCast webinar, we would absolutely love to hear from you. Reach out via email at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I just want to thank all of our speakers from Duo Security, Cisco Company, Know4, Okta, Rubrik, Securoth, and Haiku. What a crew here today for making this MegaCast possible. And a special thank you to all of you for attending the MegaCast, for asking some great questions, and of course, taking some time out of your busy schedules to learn and better equip yourselves for what is on the bleeding edge of tech to improve your organizations. I hope you have all gotten some great tips, some interesting ideas, and most of all, I hope you had some fun with me today. And before you go, do make sure to mark your calendars and come on back to join us for an EcoCast on identity governance, protection, and administration. That is taking place tomorrow, same time, same place, 12 p.m. Eastern. And you'll just have to have another sign-up link. And I hope to see you all again soon. Until then, I hope you have an absolutely magical rest of your day and take good care.